Ready?
Yeah. Ready? Honourable members, good morning. In accordance with standing orders, I announce the absence of His Honour the Speaker, and in that regard, the Deputy Speaker, Her Honour, will preside at today's sitting.
Order! All rise. Your Honor,
Let us pray. Almighty God, we thank you for giving us another day. We thank you for those who serve in this chamber. Bless this land, especially those in need. Bless all men and women, boys and girls across our nation. Remember our fellow citizens who are currently overseas. Give us all perseverance to press through discouragement and gratitude to acknowledge you in any success. For you are our Lord and our God. So Lord God, what we know not, teach us. What we have not, give us. What we are not, make us. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Blessed good morning, honorable members.
Say it again.
Blessed good morning, honorable members. The chamber is in session. Minutes. Yeah. Minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, April 24th, 2025. Honorable member.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Announcements by Your Honour, the Deputy Speaker.
Receipt of messages, the Honourable, the Senate, to the Honourable, the House of Assembly. The Honourable Senate has the honour to inform the Honourable, the House of Assembly, that at its sitting on Wednesday, the 30th of April 2025, The Seaport Industry Management Operation and Development Bill 2025 was amended to the following, in the following terms. Clause 36, the word home porting appearing before the word vessels was deleted. And the Honourable, the Senate transmits the amended bill to the Honourable House of Assembly, inviting concurrence in the amendments to the bill, dated the 30th day of April, 2025, and signed Deputy Speaker, President.
Messages from Her Excellency, the President.
I'm in receipt of two messages from Her Excellency, the President. And the first one from the State House, dated April the 26th, 2025. With reference to the address submitted to me by the Honourable the House of Assembly on the 24th of April 2025 and presented to me on the 25th of April 2025, requesting the issue of a writ for an election to fill the vacant seat for the constituency of St. James North, I wish to inform that I have today, the 26th of April 2025, issued the appropriate writ in accordance with the provisions of the section 47(2) of the Constitution and section 36 of the Representation of the People's Act, Cap 12. On the advice of the Prime Minister, the day of nomination of candidates has been fixed for Tuesday, the 6th of May, 2025, and the day upon which, if necessary, the poll shall be taken has been fixed for Wednesday, the 21st of May, 2025. The writ is returnable to me by Thursday, 22nd of May, 2025. Yours faithfully, signed by Madam President. The second piece of correspondence, dated the 1st of May, 2025, from Her Excellency. Dear Mr. Speaker, I shall be away from the island on duty leave during the period of the 1st to the 15th of May, 2025. In accordance with the provisions of Section 33 of the Constitution, the Very Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Douglas Gibson will perform the functions of the office of the President during my absence. As the Honourable, the House of Assembly will not be meeting prior to my departure, it will not be possible for the usual formal message to be sent to your chamber. Will you, therefore, please bring my absence formally to the attention of the Honourable, the House of Assembly, when next it meets. Yours faithfully, Madam President.
Petitions, papers, government notices. Papers.
Paper.
Member.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the Barbados Deposit Insurance Corporation, BDIC, annual reports for 2022, 2023, and 2024.
Government notices.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment and Validation Bill 2025. I also beg to give notice of a resolution that the Honourable the House of Assembly concur in the amendment made by the Honourable the Senate to the Seaport Industry Management Operations and Development Bill 2025.
Private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Seaport Industry Management Operations and Development Bill 2025.
The question is? Can I have someone second it, please? The question is? At the Seaport
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment and Validation Bill 2025.
The question is that the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment and Validation Bill 2025 be read the first time. All our members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches.
Honourable members, we have with us distinguished Canon Haywood. He has been elevated to that position, and I think it is only fitting that he be recognized this morning for his outstanding work in the Anglican Church and his elevation to that position of canon. Congratulations to you, sir, on behalf of the Senate.
Personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, or replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
You have some 1 second, please. The question is that these standing orders be suspended for the rest of the day sitting. All our members in favor, please say aye. Those again, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Government business.
Government's business is the order of the day.
Order number 5, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Training and Tertiary Education, to move the second reading of the Student Revolving Loan Fund Bill 2025.
Our member for St. James.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity this morning to be able to pilot the Student Revolving Loan Bill in this Honourable Chamber for the consideration of its members, because I believe it is a piece of legislation that will greatly enhance the fortunes for our young people and our seniors in Barbados because of strengthening this institution. Education has long been approved as the pathway for Barbadians to be able to advance themselves, having come from a colonial past and not being holders of assets. It has always been the path through which Barbadians have been able to improve themselves, and they've done this extremely well. But as a small developing nation with a limited capacity to offer a broad range of educational offerings, it means that our institutions have never been able to really give all Barbadians the opportunities to study what they would like to study. And therefore, over 30 years ago, the Student Revolving Loan Fund was created to help fill a gap that we had that was limiting our young people and adults in being able to pursue further education. With a banking system that wanted to focus primarily on consumption and consumer products, whether it's furniture or cars or what have you, it did not allow for the appropriate support of families who wanted to be able to give their children the opportunity to study, especially our families in the working classes. And believe me, talent and potential runs in every strata of this Barbadian society. But this society would have been losing the value of some of that potency because we were not able to give our young people the opportunity to finance the education that they wanted. And therefore, it meant that Barbados would have suffered significantly in being able to provide people with the opportunity to pursue careers that they could pursue the foundation of their dreams. One, get a piece of the rock and then be able to build the life that they wanted for their children on this rock. So the formation of the Student Revolving Loan Fund was very important. So this was established back in 1977 under the Student Revolving Loan Fund Act 1976 to 20. And its primary purpose was really to provide Barbadians with the necessary wherewithal to pursue their educational dreams, regardless of whether their families had assets or not. One of the features of this loan fund was that families could present themselves as sureties. People could step forward as sureties, even if they did not have land or assets to be able to back that loan. And the areas of study were able to cover things like academics, vocational or technical training, and these areas of study were to add significant value to our national development, because at all times, the loans were offered in support of our national development goals. So this allowed people to be able to contribute to the social and economic development of our country, and we believe that it has worked extremely well. But in order for the Student Revolving Loan to perform its role successfully, it had to remain relevant and solvent. And over the years, it would have experienced some challenges in relation to so doing. But by astute management, by the care of government to give it the necessary support, changes in legislation, etc., the Student Revolving Loan Fund has been able to evolve and to be able to be relevant and to bring significant success. So while the early beginnings might have been a little rough, over the years, they pursued rough and smooth paths, and they have been able to build an institution. It is small, but it is absolutely mighty. Mighty in fulfilling its role to help us release the capacity of the Barbadian ability that they could pursue both here and abroad opportunities for their lives. It is now in its 48th year of existence, Madam Deputy Speaker, and what it has been able to do is to provide affordable financing for thousands of Barbadians and to enable them to pursue what is consistent with their potential. I'd just like to expand on that a little bit. If you are in a living situation where there are not enough funds to help you to pursue your dreams, then what happens is that young people then are forced to take what they can afford. And because you are doing something that really is not you, it is not motivating, it's not stimulating. And very often a person will, if with the best effort in the world, they'll be average in their performance. And if they cannot make that sustained best effort all the time, they will underperform. And what does that do for a nation? What does that do for an enterprise? If you have a lot of underperforming people because they're doing jobs that they don't like, because they were not able to get the training in the areas that they do like, it will retard economic growth, and it's going to affect social satisfaction in families, people doing jobs that they don't like. And therefore, the presence of the SRLF is really to enable us to give that opportunity for expression, to help people fulfill themselves, and as a result, enjoy a much better quality of life. And because they're satisfied and can have a better quality of life, they can do better by their children. So what has been their scorecard? Over the 48 years, the Student Revolving Loan Fund has approved over 15,000 loans to Barbadians. 15,000. And the dollar value of those loans, approximately $400 million. That is significant investment in people over and above what we're doing generally in primary and secondary and tertiary education. We are empowering people who do not have the means to pursue other courses of study not accommodated domestically, to enable them to be able to pursue their dreams and therefore maximize their talent. And I want to sincerely congratulate the entity, the SRLF, for having been able to achieve that. Now, over the time, it had to keep responding and changing to the changing conditions, the needs, the desires of Barbadians, and the changing environmental conditions. And so one of the changes that we would have seen over time was the fact that more and more people were studying part-time. Initially, this was really for full-time students. But people who are studying part-time, people who want to study online, we were now able to accommodate them to be able to be a part of this program. And why is this important? Over the years, the nature of how education is executed has changed. There are very few people today in their adult years that have time to take time off from work for 3 years to go and get a degree. The fast pace of life and the demands for people to keep earning require that people find a way to continue studying while still earning. And this is why part-time and online has been important. And the Student Revolving Loan Fund has been sensitive enough and responsive enough to be able to put in place the opportunity for people to be able to use these alternative ways of studying so that they can succeed. And they've also moved away from just some of the traditional areas of study. We now are able to include things like culture and the creative sector. If you want to study dance, you can go and get a loan to enable you to pursue that particular career, and therefore building out our orange economy. So in order to facilitate that, the Student Revolving Loan Fund had to increase the loan limit from $20,000 and has brought it to its current limit of $125,000. And this was to accommodate the fact that the cost of education was rising, one, and secondly, the fact that the courses that people wanted to pursue were getting wider. And so to accommodate the additional scope, it was important to allow them to have the necessary funds that they could succeed at their careers. So at first, there was just one type of loan, as I said, just the traditional student loan. In other words, a course of study, you pay your money, you go, you study, you come back, you pay back. That was the traditional approach. But during the height of COVID, another need arose nationally. One of the responses to COVID was that we had to move and shift online to enable our children to continue to learn while we were still on lockdown. And this led to the introduction of a digital transformation loan. So now we were paying not just for the education, but we were providing assets, we were providing funds to allow families to be able to purchase the equipment, the digital equipment that was needed in order to be able to function during COVID. And this was open not only to students, but to educators as well, so they could purchase their laptops and any associated equipment that they needed to be able to cope. And this continued to help Barbados to be able to get our society to be more digital and to be able to function well. Now, the continued restraint of easy access to financing tended to leave gaps. And for some families, those gaps were impossible chasms. So if, for example, you were studying overseas and you took out a loan and you needed some extra funds, or while you were there, you succeeded in your degree, but you wanted to pursue your master's, for example, there was the tendency not to allow additional loans until you were able to pay back the first loan. But that did not make sense. Why? Because it broke the stride of the person who was on a gallop to be able to ensure that they achieved the highest educational achievements so that they could pursue the career that they wanted. And so one of the other changes that we were able to put in place was, instead of shutting out large swaths of our population from advancing, we allowed people to get what was known as a top-up loan. What this enabled them was to be able to get the additional financing to do postgraduate or professional certifications without repaying their existing loans in full. And this innovative product has actually helped hundreds of Barbadians to actually upskill and achieve the highest level in their chosen career. And the result was, I've dealt with so many students, because since being in the ministry, a number of parents, students seeking to advance themselves are sometimes feel strangled when the system does not work as well as it should, or holds them back, or prevents them from going forward in a particular area of study. So I understand how important it is that this particular loan allows people to do that top-up loan so that they can advance. Now, where we are here in 2025, the Barbadian economy finds itself in a space that is extremely different from where it was in 2000, and certainly different from where we were in 2018. There are many changes that have been taking place, and it has challenged us as to how we're going to be able to keep the economy growing, creating the jobs, and creating the economic growth that will help us to provide the social services that helps to keep our Barbadian family together. And after coming out from the aftermath of the lost decade with the Democratic Labour Party, and then with the COVID pandemic, two big lashes that actually shook the foundations of our economy, it was necessary for us to look at, does the old way in which we built the economy, is that still relevant to help us to go forward? And as the Mayor Motley administration looked at the circumstances, it was recognized, no, that the recovery of the economy could not go back to the old basis. We actually had to find a new base on which to transition the economy. And hence, the reason why we have the programs that we have as a government across every single ministry represented here in this chamber. Every single ministry has had to undergo transformation and transition themselves onto the new platform to make our economy fit for purpose. One of the challenges that we had looked at in the education area was the fact that our labor market needs were not being served properly by the educational system. That if the labor market needed ABC, we were producing DEF. And so this led to frustration. Imagine young people coming out from an educational system and then finding that some of the skills and the knowledge that they had was not relevant and did not prepare them adequately to function within the Barbadian economy. Imagine the frustration of enterprises that you hire people. Here it is, they have a degree. Here it is, they say they have certification. And then when you seek to put them to work, you find that they're not quite ready to deliver what you think they ought to be able to deliver. And so this is one of the things that drove the agenda to do education transformation. And this was to embrace not only primary, secondary, but there was a need to have transformation at the tertiary level. The two had to go hand in hand. And so under the new BLP administration that came to office in 2018, we sought to continue our bold agenda that had been truncated in 2008 and sought to chart new paths for economic growth through educational reform. Now, back then, when we were last in office, we were able to help build out the Barbadian economy with the advent of financial services. And what that meant was that we were able to create 4,000 high-paying jobs in that sector. And this led to the growth of the middle class in Barbados and the resulting consumption of that middle class that was earning very, very well during that period. This fueled economic growth within the Barbadian economy. The end result of that was that more small business formation occurred and more people started to start their own businesses and in turn hire people. So the end result was that across the economy, you had more economic growth and more spending. All of us remember the time when you could walk down the road and if you hear the ice cream truck, you didn't have to worry about whether you could, on the spur of the moment, buy ice cream for your child. People could do it. People could flock and go to the fast food places. People could do a lot of spending, casual spending, because there was sufficient money flowing within their families. And a lot of that had to do with that economic revolution that would have occurred back then in that 1994 to 2008 period. Faced with a similar challenge, not even similar, an even greater challenge with the COVID pandemic, with the supply chain issues, etc. The Mayor Mottley administration then undertook to respond to this global challenge because we recognized that it was going to require a new formula to take this country forward. The fourth industrial revolution was going to make a lot of work obsolete, that a number of careers that we took for granted, that we prepared our children for, were actively going to disappear. And so we recognized that, again, another very bold and innovative step was needed to be able to transition Barbadians onto those new skills. And so the formation of the Ministry of Training and Tertiary Education became important, that now what we needed was a ministry with a focus on how are we going to transition our current labor force, how are we going to prepare the way for the new labor force that would be in the secondary and primary schools coming through the pipeline, and then how were we going to take some of the seniors and do the necessary reskilling and upskilling that was going to be absolutely necessary if Barbadians were going to enjoy the same quality of life that they had become accustomed to. That was the issue. That was the question. And so the Ministry of Training and Tertiary Education's mandate is really to prepare and lead this transition program to move our Barbadian labor to the more lucrative and sustainable jobs and to train Barbadian citizens to global levels. That has been our mandate. Hence, the plans for the accelerated transformation of tertiary education. Even just today, in the news media, you would have seen that there were remarks made by the registrar of the BVTB explaining some of what was happening at that tertiary level to help prepare young people for this new world. On the news, you would have heard the principal of the Barbados Community College talking about the fact that we actually had to reform the curriculum at the college in order to make it fit for purpose. All of this was shared just today, and all of this is part of what the Ministry of Training and Tertiary Education is doing. So the Student Revolving Loan Fund is another very important tool in helping us to do this transition and to help us to get there. So what has it been doing recently that helps us to engage the fourth industrial revolution and prepare Barbadians for the new jobs? We have been able, Madam Deputy Speaker, to offer cybersecurity training and artificial intelligence training to hundreds of Barbadians by providing the opportunity for them to get a loan to pursue the training and to get the equipment to be able to be part of this IT revolution. And what this has done, it has exposed them to some of the latest in information technology across the world. And it has provided opportunities for jobs with decent wages. As a matter of fact, the starting salary for cybersecurity is $5,000. This helps our young people to see jobs that are capable of giving them the quality of life that they would like, give them the inspiration to strive for better, And so we're hoping that as we move out of this initial phase with the cybersecurity and the AI, we'll actually be able to ramp up and expand and be able to improve what we're doing so that we're able to give more opportunities. And this was supported by the Student Revolving Loan Fund. Had that not existed, hundreds of Barbadian young people and seniors would not have been able to undertake this training and be able to join the global revolution. Now, under the ministry, they've been able to continue innovating products. Shortly, the Student Revolving Loan Fund will be launching a couple of new programs. One is a basic bread and butter program, but very necessary. They will now be offering back to school loans. We all know the challenge that parents have every year in providing back to school supplies for their children. All of us as MPs in this chamber know about the work and the amount of money that we have to find in order to contribute to families who are challenged. Just imagine it takes about $400 to $500 to equip a child to go to school, and that is modest. I'm talking about giving the child top of the line anything. That is modest. Imagine a family with 3 or 4 children, and you actually need to find $2,000 every September to be able to make sure your child can go to school dressed properly and with all of his or her supplies. So the Student Revolving Loan Fund will be shortly launching this back to school loan at reasonable rates, easy repayments, to allow parents who are challenged to be able to have the opportunity to provide on easy terms. And that is not the only product they will be launching. Because we have an aging population, because we don't have a sufficient number of young people coming through to swell our labor force, it means that Barbados has to find a way to take seniors who are currently at the end of their work life, take those who have ended their work life, and look to see how we can upskill and reskill them so that they can find meaningful employment if they so desire, so that they could start a service or a small business if they so desire, to be able to make income to stretch those pension dollars. One of the things that we have as our aim as a government for the Ministry of the Training and Tertiary Education is that there must be continuous learning in Barbados, that all across this country, every single Barbadian recognizes that school is not just about what happens at primary and secondary or even one tertiary institution qualification, but that every single person will have to do continuous learning in order to be relevant and in order to be able to function in a world that is changing very, very quickly. And so the second product that the Student Revolving Loan Fund will be launching is going to be a professional and training loan. One of the things, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I have learned is that any training I did 3 years ago is no longer relevant to me now. I have to keep reading, I have to keep studying, I have to keep learning, I have to keep seeking out information, and I have to keep submitting myself to a classroom and becoming a student and learning like everybody else. Nothing that I have done 3 years ago is still relevant. And so one of the things that you will be hearing from the Ministry of Training and Tertiary Education, and I want to share this with all of my colleagues, all of us will have to engage in continuous learning. This is going to be critical for the civil service. They too have to do it. What is happening at the moment is that the world is changing, but because internally we are changing slowly, the world has taken the game to a higher level, and the truth is we're not ready to play, and therefore we're not ready to win. And so part of what this ministry must do is to help people to understand the urgency of now, that we have to engage in continuous learning, and we have to share the platforms, show what it is we have on offer, direct them to other resources, and encourage people to start learning again. Madam Deputy Speaker, you would remember many, many years ago, even though a parent did not have all the education that their children were being exposed to, they always encouraged their children to go to school and learn, always did. They may not know the Spanish, may not understand the English, couldn't help them with chemistry, but they would take the book and say, sit down now, tell me, explain, what's your homework? That was the push that the society had that caused its young people to keep moving forward. And what happened? Those young people from those poor homes were able to do better, and then were able to pull their families up. I hear the stories all the time, how proud they are to say when they have acquired that certification, what they were able to do for their mother. They were able to fix the house. They were able to give her appliances that she had not been able to afford because they appreciated the fact that she helped to push them. We have to get Barbadians pushing again from all levels, every single person, to get involved in training, to get involved in continuous education. And the Student Revolving Loan Fund, with its new product, is going to be there to act as a strategic partner to assist them to achieve this particular goal. One of the things that is very dear to my heart, and we will be putting together something to put before Cabinet. If seniors are going to be able to live long and independently, because we simply don't have enough spaces and institutions to take care of the elderly, we have to help them to be able to live independently and safely. And part of that has to do with digital literacy and digital education that allows them to be able to manage their affairs while they're not able to be as spry when they were young. And so seniors are going to be engaged in whatever programming that we put out in the public space. We're going to be deliberately targeting our elder population to get involved and put things in place to help strengthen them in their path to continuous learning. Now, in order for us to be able to offer new products, in order to be able to support the demand for funding, because after all, if the ministry is going out there and stimulating people to get involved, it means more people will be demanding spaces, more people will be demanding support in order to be able to engage continuous learning. So it means that the Student Revolving Loan Fund must have available the financial resources that can allow it to respond to that need. So the Student Revolving Loan Fund has now been classified under the Public Finance Management Act 2019 as a commercial state-owned enterprise. It would have undergone some restructuring during the financial year 2022 to 2023 under the leadership of its management and the Honourable Member for St. Philip West. What the restructuring exercise did, it helped to ensure its sustainability by allowing the SRLF to improve operational efficiency and to become more customer-centered. So with a nimbler organization emerging out of that restructuring, plus the very hard work under its management team, the results were immediately seen when the SRLF won the inaugural Public Sector Award in 2023 as one of the most outstanding government units. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. Philip West is proud of this achievement because it happened under her leadership. And I am proud of this little gem that it was able to do that because it stands as a beacon, it stands as an example, a role model that in truth and in fact, we can be efficient and world-class in the public sector. And so I want to heartily congratulate them that their hard work in operating with greater efficiency and greater profitability they actually don't need to rely on government subventions. And I know that is music to the ears of the Honourable Member with responsibility for finance. Now, what they've been able to do that helps them to be able to achieve this independence, they have the establishment of an investment portfolio. But one of the challenges that we've had over the years was the delinquency rate. Because as you would know, when people are borrowing from government, for some reason they feel they don't have to pay back. They feel that they need to pay everybody else, but government does not need to be repaid. Why can they not just let me have the money as a grant? That was so acute at one stage that the SRLF was practically insolvent. But because of the hard work, the prudent management putting in systems, they've been able to push that back. So, for example, arrears went as high as 90% in the late 80s. And in the early 90s, it was gradually reduced. By the 2000s, it had gone to 60%. But that is still extremely high. By 2013, the arrears were 47%. But I have news for the Honourable Chamber and for the country at large that the current debt, the current arrears for payment of loans at the Student Revolving Loan Fund is now 11% as of March 31st, 2025, and y'all can clap for that. Now, we've come a long way, but our ultimate goal is to work towards bringing our arrears down to 5%. And with the continued strategic management, responsive customer care, and supportiveness of the organization, we believe that we'll be able to manage that delinquency rate and get it down gradually to the 5%. Now, in order to achieve some of these goals, we need to do some amendments to the legislation. And this is important to enable us to be able to allow the SRLF to reposition within the new space and be fit for the purpose of this moment. This is what has been important. So the legislation that is before the House is there to enable them to respond with more programs, greater accountability, strengthening their system so that they can respond to our people. So over the years, as I would have shared, there were some changes that they had made. So I would have mentioned lending to persons for part-time and online. They also responded to the need for higher loan limits and greater flexibility to shift from just having two sureties to allow people, if they had some kind of asset that could back the loan, that they could use a mix, because sometimes it was not always easy to find people who would stand as sureties for the loan. And in terms of the collection efforts by the SRLF, they were able to put in place things that would help them to so do. So one of the things that they were able to set up was the ability to be able to issue certificates that they could action quickly, debt certificates that they could action quickly in order to be able to regain payments for the debts that were outstanding. And this has been important, and that has been an important change for them, helping them to be more efficient. In addition to that, within the legislation, we have been able in Section 5 to incorporate compliance with the Public Finance Management Act. In Section 4.1, enhance the corporate governance structure by expanding to a board of directors and not just simply a management committee, helping it to be stronger and more professional in its approach. We are also able to broaden oversight, where we can now have the flexibility to appoint different people to the chairmanship and deputy chairmanship of that particular board. We want to be able to expand the expertise of those who sit on the board, and I want to really encourage Barbadians. Service is so very important in a country. All of us, bar none, have benefited from what this country has had to offer, whether it's the services in health, education, postal services, environmental services. No matter what it has been, all of us have benefited. And all of us need to give back in some way to the country that has nurtured us and be able to provide for the next generation of Barbadians. And so service on our boards is very important. And so we want to be able to tap into the professional expertise that is out there. Even though people are busy, we need you. We need you to say yes, to be able to sit on boards and bring your expertise to bear on guiding our institutions so that we can improve all that we need to do for the Barbadian public. We also felt it necessary in Section 6, Madam Deputy Speaker, to enact provisions to address conflicts of interest, to ensure that members who sit on the board are operating appropriately and ethically to avoid conflicts that might arise. But one of the biggest things that we've sought to achieve with this piece of legislation is to make funds more available to the SRLF by allowing the SRLF to take deposits. This was something that they could not do before. They had to use the revolving loan monies. If they were short, government would have had to top them up, but they've been able not only to become solvent and generate profit and be able to use that, they recognize that if they're going to be supportive of the journey of the Ministry of Training and Tertiary Education in supporting the call to more education, that we must have resources. And so we plan to expand availability of funds by enabling the SRLF to take deposits, because it will add an additional revenue stream that can create growth. And we believe that this will be a game changer for us. So this is important. So in Section 51GH, we will be allowing them to be able to take deposits. Another element that will assist them in managing the financial affairs properly is to create the flexibility for them to be able to set the interest rates, so that we are not bound by what is in the marketplace, but that we can look at what makes the best sense to achieve the objectives for the fund, to keep it profitable, but at the same time, keep the loans affordable so that Barbadians can enjoy and engage the use of them. They also want to be able to expand the customer base, and we plan to do that by not just people who are students who want to study, but their parents and guardians will also be allowed to use new loan products that they want to introduce to the public. One of the things that was a difficulty for us when we started the cybersecurity and AI training, because of what the country had gone through, we had hundreds and hundreds of young people who had come out from university and found difficulty in getting a start with a job. And what this meant was that a lot of parents were still carrying their children. So without having jobs, children were not able on their own to go and get a loan to pursue their higher education. But one of the restrictions was that you could not be over 60 to act as a surety for a loan for your child. Now, this was a particular problem when you were talking about a small loan. When you were looking at a loan that you only needed for a year or 2 years, or you needed it for a few months, when you wanted a 10,000 or 5,000 or whatever was the amount. And so changes have been made to to allow an extension of the age of the surety to be able to go up to 65 years on some types of loans. And it's those small loans for short periods that we have offered this extension. And we trust that the House will look favorably on it and ensure that we get it. The other change has been because of the difficulty in getting sureties, because obviously too, with the economic crisis within the economy, less people were now in a position with assets or money on a bank or whatever, and therefore people were shying away even more, acting as sureties for others for the SRLF. So instead of 2 sureties, we now want to allow 1 surety for loans up to a maximum level of 30,000. Over 30,000, you would either need the 2 or you would need some assets to back it up. Now, another excellent program, this would have applied before, but we repeated it in this legislation. We've increased the age of people studying from 35 to 50 years. And if you're over 50, the application has to be made to the minister to allow you to get a loan. But you can be assured that once you're studying something that will develop nationally, once you meet the necessary criteria, then it will be looked at as favorably as we can. So we believe that these things will help to strengthen our operations. We believe that our corporate governance structure changes will help us to build a stronger, more professional organization that can go into the future, that our lending capabilities will be expanded, and that we'll be able to improve our collections. So I want to thank the Honourable Madam Deputy Speaker for giving me the opportunity to share this with you. We believe that with this in place, our Student Revolving Loan Fund will be able to be an able partner for Barbadians going into the future. We're looking forward to them supporting the new areas of study, the cutting edge areas of study, because we want to make them available to people that they can go to any university overseas or online to be able to pursue a course of study that is important and is needed for the diversification of the Barbadian economy. And we believe that we can trust the Student Revolving Loan Fund management team, given the opportunity to have this support through this legislation, that they will make excellent use of it. They will not let us down, but they will deliver as they have delivered in the past. And I want to be able to say to that team, through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, well done. We are proud of your work, and we appreciate what you have been able to do and the profitability and success that you've brought to these operations, and the pride you've given the ministry in being able to be one of the outstanding government units in 2023 to receive a national award. I'm obliged to you, Madam Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Honourable members, the question is. I'll have someone to please second it. Okay. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes, you're Deputy Speaker. Good morning, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Good morning, sir. I'm glad to see you.
Thank you, ma'am. And you are Deputy Speaker. Now, I must confess that I expected to hear a longer speech from the Honourable Member for St. James, where is she from now? St. James South. Those who will not describe themselves as the best of the ministers in here, when charged with the responsibility to introduce legislation, they normally meet their obligation to say to the public what the legislation is about. What we've heard this morning are some snippets in relation to policy, the usual self-congratulation, the language that is reminiscent of the comedians in the Calypso tanks asking your colleagues to clap for that. This is a parliament after all. And if I were not to speak now, and if other members were not to join in this debate, and I hope they do, so that the public will hear from the government what this legislation is about. 19 pages of it. And sitting as leader of the opposition, 27 pages of legislation. And is it now my responsibility to do what the Honourable Member for St. James South ought to have done? Well, let me congratulate the Honourable Member for consistency. If there's any congratulation, the Honourable Member has been very consistent. We are met with the usual tedious and soporific orations, a litany of cliches. That's what the public now has become used to. Building out, ramping up. I started to write them. Your teachers at school will always tell you, your English teachers will always tell you, avoid cliches. People resort to cliches when they have nothing to say. But we have a piece of legislation before this parliament, 27 pages. And the people of this country and this parliament are met with nothing but cliches and self-congratulation and no condescension to the letter of the legislation. Reminds me of when they brought the better business legislation. And the Honourable Member got up and told this parliament and this country, I'd never forget it. Oh, this legislation will unleash the trillions of dollars waiting to be invested in Barbados. Well, we are waiting. Trillions of dollars will be unleashed into Barbados when they pass this better business legislation a few months ago, which really was to divide the public service, that department, create a corporate body and give somebody a job. And I predicted that then. I'm not a prophet. I predicted that then, and precisely what I said has happened. That you have excised from a public service department, a corporate entity, give somebody a job, and come in here and tell the public that you are doing this to unleash the trillions of dollars that are seeking investment all over the world, and perhaps billions will come into Barbados. Well, the people of Barbados are tired of this nonsense. The people of Barbados are tired of this foolishness that you're coming into a parliament and speaking in terms of fairy tales. Because that is all this is. And today you come to a parliament, the public expects to hear what the new student revolving loan bill is about, according to its letter and intent and content, and they hear nothing about it. What they hear is a member inviting what is barely a quorum today. And I want the public to know this. They don't show it on TV. All they show is the speaker. That the members in here are probably obliging in the numbers in which they're present merely to constitute a quorum. And this is what we hear today. You think the public of Barbados does not deserve better than to come here every week with this quality and content of debate? But I congratulated the member, the Honourable Member, for consistency. And I used the words tedious and soporific. I looked around the chamber, Honourable Member for St. Joseph and St. James Central, animated conversation, St. Peter and St. John, eyes focused on their laptops or whatever it is they have in front of them. Not a man paid attention. And perhaps that is the merited response. Am I now supposed to, as leader of the opposition, tell the public what this legislation is about and why it is brought here and why we are going to repeal the previous legislation? Not a word about that. Not a word about that, because this parliament has become an exercise in ritual. And if I sound angry, Your Honor, it is because I am. Well, let me go to the content and the letter of this legislation. And let me tell the public
Please do.
what ought to have been said. Says this act. Look, I intend to do this in silence. Don't tempt me to say something to repeat something that was said a few days ago. Don't tempt me to do it. For the public, it reads, a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Grant of Loans to Finance Studies at Educational Institutions, the Management and Administration of the Student. I'll read that again. In the event that even the English in this is badly drafted, I'm going to be faithful to the drafting and read it precisely as it is written. An act to provide for the grant of loans to finance studies at educational institutions, the management and administration of the Student Revolving Loan Fund, the conditions of service for employees of the Student Revolving Loan Fund, and related matters. We then go to the short title. And the short title reads, this act may be cited as the Student Revolving Loan Fund Act 2025. Please, when you come to a parliament, give that basic introduction. Tell the public why you're here and what you're doing, and why and what you're doing, what it intends to do. I will do it.
Thank you.
Come in here talking about clap for that. This is a Calypso tank now. The purpose of, I come to clause 3. I told you to keep quiet here. I told you to keep quiet.
Honourable member, please.
I told him to keep quiet.
Honourable member, please.
The Honourable member
Continue.
for St. Michael Northwest is keeping quiet, and I want the Honourable member for Christchurch East to keep quiet too.
Honourable member, please, will you continue?
Thank you.
I am not even hearing.
Thank you.
a
Tell him
pin
keep
drop.
quiet.
Sir, I'm speaking.
I beg
I
your
am not
pardon, ma'am.
hearing a pin drop. I am listening to you attentively. Please continue.
I want both of them to keep quiet. One is abiding by the rules.
Please, sir, I'm not sure what mood you're in this morning. Please, sir, please, we've been going very well today. You have started in your presentation to talk about interruptions, to talk about the numbers that are here today. If we did not have a quorum, sir, we would not have been able to start. And I do not want to go down in history to indicate to you, sir, that sometimes in a whole year you never came in here 10 times. Please, let us get and do the people's business. People are listening to you. We want to hear what you have to say. We are willing to make any adjustments that have to be made. But we want for the public of Barbados to understand this is still the very highest chamber. There's absolutely no need for acrimony. We are all in this together to educate the public and to empower Barbadians and those who are living among us that may not be Barbadians. So, sir, please continue with this aspect of the discussion.
I'm obliged to you, ma'am. I was merely reflecting that the Honourable member for St. Michael Northwest is very obedient when it comes to these rules. He isn't interrupting me. But it appears that for some reason, the honorable member for Christchurch East wants to interrupt me. I want the behavior of those two gentlemen to be the same.
Sir, this is not a Sunday school. Let
But
us
the
please
Honourable,
hold. I am speaking, excuse me. I am speaking. For the last 15 minutes, I've been listening. You started up well. Let us continue on that path. There's no need for the acrimony and the criticisms and the insults. This is a chamber that the whole of the world is listening to. And we must continue with the government's business, the people's business, in the most comprehensive, as respectful manner. We are all honorable members here, and members will make a little comment. And members will be stepping in and stepping out. And they'll be digressing a little bit. Let us please take to this student revolving loan matter, and let us get the public to be aware and to take access, because our children need to receive, and our relatives and friends, they need to be able to access this kind of situation in these very trying times, so they can advance their education and services as well. So if you, sir, will continue, we will be only too happy, and there will be no more reflection on any numbers in here, because this parliament could not start this morning without a quorum. The public will believe that there are only 6 people in here. We will not start unless we continue on our professional trend of doing it the right way, because this is one of the most honorable and highest chambers in this country. We will set the trends so that the youth and others can follow. So let us please go on in a manner that is conducive to learning and people wanting to listen to us and to be educated and to be wanting to excel to become a member of parliament. But the track that you're going down now says, in here has gone to the dogs. It is not. It is the most honorable chamber, and people out there respect us. We must extend that respect to them and stop with the innuendo and so on that is really detracting from the important purpose of this distinguished piece of legislation. Please.
I'm obliged to you, ma'am. And all I wanted you to do, Your Honor, was to control he who walked in, and as soon as he took his seat, he started to interrupt me.
I remember that is the
And he must not do it, because the rules of this chamber say that a member who is on his feet must be heard in silence. That's the rules of the court.
I remember you have been here for a while, and you know the matters. You know what are the little trends that we have here that the public is not interested in. The people's business is what we want to discuss. Perhaps, sir, it is because you have been in here very little time in your tenure that you do not understand what transpires here in this chamber. Let us move on in faith and love and friendship and education to serve the people of this distinguished country, please.
Your Honor.
We were sent here to do the people's business. Let us do it in peace and harmony. And a little joke will come on this side and so. But you're a strong man. Well, if you want to make it a calypso tent, I will not tolerate it. So please continue to deal with this matter of the legislation associated with the upgrades of the Student Revolving Loan Fund.
And I will appeal to Your Honor, in your capacity as Deputy Speaker, to ask honorable members to allow me to continue in silence. That is my
I am not sure, sir, please. I am not sure, sir, if you are hearing things in your head, because I have not seen anybody here on either side say anything or do anything. People are talking, members are talking with one another, whatever their personal matters are, but it isn't anything that will impact on your presentation. I am so happy to see you today early, sir. I am so happy that you are here, and I am willing to learn from you, because you are a knowledgeable individual whom people have respected and have voted to make you a distinguished member of this chamber. And that kind of expression says we respect you highly, you respect us too. There's no need to shout, there's no need to get angry, because at the end of the day, that is the rough and tumble part of it that we get. But perhaps, as I said, you have not been here long enough to get an idea as to what transpired, especially when we were in opposition. And therefore, let us continue with the people's business and make sure that the rest of Barbados get to understand what this amendment and this new bill is all about, so that we can move forward as a people and not just as individuals or separate political parties. We are in this together. And therefore, sir, please continue.
I'm obliged to you, ma'am. I don't wish to feel that I'm being set up by any noises, so I will move on. Please don't set me up, any members
And
in
please
here.
don't shout too either. We're willing
I
to
will not
listen
shout,
to you.
ma'am. I will
We're
not
here
shout.
to hear you. We're in this together.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
I don't want to feel that I'm being set up by people interrupting my speech. And that refers to the Honourable Member for Christchurch East. Please ask him to keep quiet. Let me press on. So that, Your Honor, I was saying that the only, well, I heard the Honourable Member for St. James South remark that this new legislation moves the loan limit from $25,000 to $120,000. And one expects that in an economy that is, like all other economies, inflationary. Of course, this economy may be more aggressively inflationary than most others, including across the Caribbean and across the globe. Indeed, there are statistics now published officially which reveal that the Barbadian economy is among the most inflationary in the world. In the world. And so when the minister comes here and says that the legislation is to allow for the increase of the loan limit from $25,000 to $120,000, I think, or 125, it doesn't matter now, the precise figure. That is something that is expected. But we remain disappointed, the public must remain disappointed that the oration, the discourse, did not move much beyond that, except to characterize itself by making reference to a number of cliches. And I started to write them, but I got tired. Building out, ramping up, global revolution, upskill and reskill, efficient and world class. And if the discourse had gone on for a lot longer, we would have heard the favorite, sustainability, resilience, and I think the latest one of this government now is the ecosystem. This is what the people of Barbados are being visited with. And I say it over and over, sweet talk, that this government is now the leading manufacturer of sweet talk. Where we can't get investment in manufacturing, this government is leading the charge by manufacturing a lot of sweet talk and fooling the people of Barbados that something new is happening in this country. Nothing new is happening. All that is new that is happening is that the government believes that sweet talk is the way to win the hearts of Barbadians who are now absolutely frustrated and disappointed that very little appears to be happening in spite of the sweet talk. So I come back to the legislation, and I insist I do what ought to have been done by the Honourable Member for St. James South. I come to Clause 3, Your Honour. The purpose of this act is to provide for A, the grant of loans to finance studies at educational institutions. B, the management and administration of the Student Revolving Loan Fund. C, the conditions of service for employees of the Student Revolving Loan Fund. And D, related matters. Now, Barbadians are aware that education, and I've said this before in here and outside, and I'll say it again, the thrust in education has been the most pivotal among this country's revolutionary moments. None has been more pivotal than the thrust in education, which took place in 1961. And as the government tries to erase the significance of independence and to replace it with some dubious thing called Barbados National Day, the people of this country will also not allow this government to remove the significance of 1961, which marked the revolution, the social revolution in this country, when the bright children of this country began to receive an education not by privilege, but by right. And that is what this chamber would have been well served with today. But inevitably, as the numbers now swell, congrats. What this country wants to hear today are not the usual boring personal anecdotes. The public wants to hear an objective discussion. I'm tired of the silly personal anecdotes. A lot of people come in here and they can't have an objective discussion unless they insert themselves at the center of it with some personal anecdote. I did this and I did that, and when this happened to me, be objective. But that fits in with the government's approach to public debate, that a public debate on an issue is not completed unless you insert yourself at the center of it. So you're at the center, you're the star, you're the celebrity. But let us try to take public debate beyond the personal, beyond the subjective, and let us tell the people how legislation relates to their interests and welfare. And so, any initiative that intends to give access to the highest levels of education is noble. And the public has to hear this from me. I'm the leader of the opposition, I'm not the government. And I remain disappointed that the Honourable Member for St. James South, could not have told this to the people of Barbados in a longer speech, perhaps. We are patient, we have the time. And so I say to the public that it appears that the legislation intends to, in keeping with the inflationary trends within this economy and admittedly within other economies, because a lot of the loans are made for overseas study. And therefore you bring legislation to broaden or to make easier access to a fund. That's what it is about. Except that the Parliament is still deprived of this government's real reason for repealing one or abolishing one and instituting a new one. But I will say it on behalf of the government. I will presume to do that. And this discussion, this debate must take place within the larger educational trust in this country. And at one point we heard the Honourable Member for St. James South invite her colleagues to clap for that, to applaud. And the Honourable Member focused attention on the Honourable Member, I think, for St. Philip West, the current debt repayment is down to 11%, and the objective is to take it to 5%. Education has become very expensive. And I recall one of my early speeches in here. I believe it was the budget speech of 2018, I think it was 2018, when I congratulated the government, thank God, when I congratulated the government for, thank God I did it. Thank God I did it. And thank God. When I congratulated the government for making Are you hearing me, ma'am?
I'm hearing you loud and clear. I heard the repetition.
Well, tell the honourable member for St. James Central that you're hearing me.
Please continue to thank God and let us continue with the business, the people's business.
I'm of good spirit today, Your Honour. Thank God.
I am happy for the Christian approach. Please continue.
I know you are. You're one of the few of them are here. Madam Deputy Speaker. So I was returning this Parliament's memory to my first budget debate speech. And I'm doing this because I heard it here a few weeks ago, man, they're reproducing my speeches to play for the public. All of them on my Facebook page, ma'am. I haven't removed one.
Will you please get back to student revolving loan funds?
Yes, I'm on education.
The public is very happy to hear, especially poor people.
Happy to hear me.
Happy to
I know
hear.
they're happy to hear me.
Happy to hear, but-
I have elected to be the voice for them. As I said a few hours ago, the truth is not entirely told unless the voice of suffering is allowed to speak. And the party, from this position, we have elected to be the voice for the suffering. In the face of a government that refuses to represent the interests of those who suffer in this country, the large number of persons who endure the suffering at the hands of a government that can be very oppressive. But let me come back to 2018 when I delivered that first speech in support of the government's then proposal to liberalize access among young Barbadians to university education. And I say that on principle, and I still say it today. So when they're looking for my speeches, let them publish that one. But what I cannot applaud today in education is the fact that too many of our primary school and early secondary school children are absent from the school on a daily, weekly, and sometimes monthly basis. We're on the subject of education today, and does this government know? Does this Minister of Education, well, I don't know what is the title today. I'm hearing all kinds. I grew up in a country in which we always had a Minister of Education. Now they have diluted that sacred term. We used to have a Minister of Education. I don't know what it is now. Then we had 2, and now we are back to 1. But let us not digress. I bring notice to this government that many of our young children are being deprived of access to education, not because institutionally they are being deprived, but socially and economically they are being deprived. So you can establish these beautiful institutions, including the Loan Fund, which is a noble and beautiful institution, but let the government reduce itself now to contact with the ordinary people in this country. Let the government reduce its contact to those who suffer. Let the government reduce its contact to the poor in this country. whose children are absenting themselves from school because the parents do not have enough money to give them breakfast, to give them lunch money. And as I said elsewhere, and I say it here, there are little boys across St. Michael who are catching chickens when they should otherwise be in the school and selling them and giving the money to their mothers so that the mothers can purchase food items from the shops and supermarkets to give them lunch. So when the government comes here with this deodorized and sanitized legislation and asks for applaud among its members, let this government be aware of the plight of those who suffer in this country. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of this charade that seeks to avoid contact with the suffering and the struggles of the people of this country. Ask the teachers who are under the charge of this Ministry of Education. Ask the principals to produce the registers. Do they still keep registers in the schools, ma'am? You were a good teacher. And it was more than a ritual that the teacher, at the beginning of the day, took a register and called the names of those beautiful children of God. And you would hear, present ma'am, present ma'am. In fact, they didn't call you ma'am, present teacher. Are they still doing it? And if they're still doing it, it must now be done to this government's and this ministry's embarrassment. So when you come here and sanitize and deodorize the legislation, that is the veneer. But tear down that veneer and understand what is happening in education in this country. And it was not only the fiasco at Government Hill, and I insist that this ministry must continue to take responsibility for targeting those children at Government Hill and exposing them to a drill in which they ought to have received prior notice. I am about to use the term domestic terrorism. That a simulation loses its meaning when you fail to give notice to those whom you seek to protect by that simulation. It was not a simulation, it was an ambush. And they suffered trauma. They suffered, the children at Government Hill suffered trauma. And I have had the privilege of sitting in this parliament prior to today. And I have heard the Honourable Member for St. James South attempt to distance the ministry from responsibility for what happened on Government Hill on that fateful day when the children at Springer were terrorized and traumatized in what ought to have been a simulation that turned into an ambush. Get angry with me. Get angry with me. But a lot of people in this country were angry then, and they remain angry today because this government has not felt it proper to improve its relationship with the educational institutions in this country. And if you want more evidence of it, a man receives a call close to midnight on the day before school is to begin, and he is reassigned. I am sorry for raising my voice, ma'am. I apologize to you. But that was ambush too. Not only were the students at Springer Memorial ambushed, but the principals who received short and inadequate notice of transfer to new schools, that is ambush. And what does it do to the educational institutions in this country? It destabilizes them. And you come in here, this government comes in here with deodorized and sanitized legislation to give the impression that all is well in education in this country. All is not well. All is not well. And the people have sat quietly and endured this charade of good government. These pleas, these appeals in here, oh, clap for that. And a parliament that is constituted today, 28-1, gives applause to a sole speaker, and the content of the speech is unrelated to the plight of the people in this country. No safeguard for the rights, interests, and entitlements of the people of this country, and more importantly, for the young, innocent children of this country who are suffering at the hands of maladministration in education. I say that. So that was what I describe as the act of domestic terrorism at Springer Memorial School. It is what I describe as the instability visited on a system in which principles are disrespected by inadequate notice of transfer. That is what is happening in this country, and I must be the voice for those who suffer. I can't allow this government to rampage across this country in self-congratulation, perpetrating injustice against the people of this country and believing that you're perfect. Nothing is perfect in this government. Nothing is perfect in this Ministry of Education, and the people are angry, and the children are suffering at the hands of an incompetent government when it comes to the administration of education in this country. And if that were, and we can think that that is enough. You think this government thinks the people of this country forget the IDB survey? This government can convince itself that the people of this country will ever forget the content and the consequences of the IDB survey? You think they forget? You think that because they can't pay the legal fees or having difficulty in paying legal fees that they have forgiven this government? This government can think that the silence in relation to that traumatic visitation in abuse of the rights of children in this country, the government can convince itself that they've forgotten. They have not forgotten. And they will not forget. A child leaves home. When I was a child, the last thing the mothers used to do used to put some powder in the bosom of the child. You all know that? Cast some powder in the bosom of the child. The final act of tenderness and love before that child leaves home. You know that, ma'am. Honourable Deputy Speaker, you know that. I know you know.
Yes, sir, and I've given you a lot of latitude because we still need for you to get back.
We're speaking on education. We're speaking on education.
We're speaking on education, but we're specific.
Be ye not affrighted. Be ye not affrighted. If they got to take some lashes, they'll take them. And you would notice that in a certain absence, they've gone quiet.
I will not allow them to interrupt you, sir.
No, the interrupter gone. They took him somewhere. I don't know if they took him.
We only have honourable members in here, sir, right now.
We now have a parliament that is very respectful now, and they're respecting my right to speak. So that when I complained earlier, I complained with justification, so that the silence now that visits this parliament results from that absence. And I was urging him to be as silent and respectful as is the member for St. Michael Northwest, who is respectful and silent. That's all I was doing, but let not you and I digress, ma'am. Let us get back to the subject.
I want you though to collide with the whole matter that we are dealing with, in the interest of all of us getting an opportunity to be able to do our presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know you're focused on the primary and the secondary, and this matter is to do with tertiary education as well. So if you can collide, please. In my ignorance, I just want to keep you focused on it, so that the rest of Barbados, not only who we are here, who also are here, but the rest of Barbados can get the gist of it as well.
Yes.
Continuing from where the Honourable Member for St. James South had made her presentation.
I know that you,
So the linkages is what I want you to let us work on in the interest of letting the public know we are interested in their own welfare and their future. So please go ahead, sir, and with the legislation that we're discussing today. You're a very bright man. I know you've lost your thought.
and you're
please
very
continue.
kind, ma'am.
Please continue.
Watching the numbers. The
We
minute-
have a quorum, sir. If there were no quorum, you know, I'd be the first. I used to be a Cub Scout leader and a Brownie leader, and I believe in standards. We do have a quorum. Will you please continue
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
interest of time? And the public is wanting to hear you and your comments and your presentations and your ideas and so in relation to this legislation, this piece of legislation that I too consider to be very important because I have grandchildren out there who will benefit by it because they are at that age where they're moving on to tertiary education.
That is
So
why I
it's a
feel,
good area you're onto.
amongst all of them, that is why I feel such comfort in addressing a parliament under your presidency. That you can empathize.
You probably do not know me as well as you know.
And that
member
you
for
are, by your
Christchurch.
own admission, a granny.
You do not know me as well as you know the member for Christchurch East.
East?
Because that is what you are laboring on. You'll be laboring the point on it all the time. I don't know what's
No,
has
not
gone wrong,
laboring
but if
there.
that is a personal matter with you and the honourable
No, it's
member,
not personal.
please take it elsewhere.
No,
but can we
no,
move
it's not
on,
personal.
sir? We move on.
But every time he comes in here and I am on my feet, he does that. And what he is not aware of is that he's disrespecting you.
Let us move on, please.
Let us move
We're
on.
not in any fight. That's why the public out there believe that we're antagonistic towards one another.
Well, they can
And
believe
so
that.
let us move on in peace.
And if I appear
And,
to be
and
fighting against
educate the
government,
public
is a
that they
noble-
want to hear, poor people out there want to hear about this student revolving loan
Yes.
and the upgrades and so that they know that their children's future will be a special one as they move on with their tertiary education.
Yes. So we were,
Let us move on, please. And thank you for your patience.
as we used to say, nobody's born big. You start as a child and you come up. And we are dealing with the progression in relation to education in this. Okay.
Honourable member, please. I am a very gentle child. And I'm very tolerant. Please. You don't have to be counting the members. We have a quorum. Otherwise, I will be the first to say, honourable members, please return. But I don't want you in your own feisty way
Yes.
to be making the comments and causing the members to leave because perhaps the one or two have gone. It is because we have not gone anywhere since 10:30.
Oh, they've gone?
I am not saying that. I am saying we have not gone any further since 10:30, and we want for you to collide. You've made all of the comments about the children taking chickens and selling, and so on and so forth. Yes, that is understood, and it has to be addressed, because our children are God's special gift to us, and we need to make sure they get the quality education and care that is necessary as we advance. So please,
Thank you, ma'am.
continue, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. And you and I had reached a point. You and I had reached a point, ma'am, where we had agreed that one of the more gentle acts done by a parent is that of that goodbye on mornings when the child leaves home for school. And you are a granny, you've told us, and a good one too. If your stewardship as a granny reflects in your stewardship in that chair, you must be a good granny. And therefore, when you bid your children farewell, your grandchildren, until the hour past 3, you expect that that child will come home different only in that he or she has received increased learning. But you don't expect that child to go to a school, even if it is a university, and to be handed a survey. And I'm saying this because the people of Barbados must be reminded of what this government did. And the scars of that action have not left the landscape, the social and academic landscape of this country. That's the point I'm making. And who knows what is, or what are. There's a doctor in the house, and I'm going to use the terms that they put on the reports. What are the sequelae? What are the sequelae? A Latin word, but doctors around here write Latin sometimes. sequelae. AE would indicate that it is in its plural form. In its singular form, it would be secula. For the Latinists in here. I don't know how many are here, but there's a doctor in the house. And the sequelae of that survey, who knows? Let us ask the doctor in the house. What has it done to those children? What has the Ministry of Education, in dereliction of its duty, done to those children? The sequelae, is it short-term, medium-term, or long-term? But we come in here to deodorize and sanitize legislation and the executive acts of the Ministry of Education cause perhaps either reparable or irreparable damage to the children of this country. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? That's the preacher to my left hand, he knows the scriptures. He's a preacher. But the point I'm making is that this ministry, whether under the stewardship of the Honourable Member for St. James South, or the previous stewardship of the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, has been one of the tragic failures of this government's administration of education in this country. And I know there's a doctor in the house, but permit me to express an opinion, albeit with deference to the doctor in the house, that I believe the consequences of that intervention are far-reaching. Who can say what is the injury, psychological or mental injury to a child who has been asked the kinds of questions, and I will not repeat them today, that were asked in that IDB survey. And I say today that this Ministry of Education must continue to take responsibility not only for the ambush at Springer Memorial, but for the ambush in the IDB survey. That is what we say. And that is what the people of Barbados say. And that is what the parents of Barbados say, speaking vicariously for their children. What injury has been done by that survey? And this government expects to let it slide and to come in here asking for applause? I ought to have made a note of those who applauded. And what I will say, since my attention is focused more so than any other day on two particular parliamentarians, one of them did not applaud. And I'm not even going to identify that person by gender. that parliamentarian did not applaud. So let the public understand what is happening within this government. Ignore the sycophants. Ignore those who rampage across social media with propaganda. I know what I observed in here today. Is there consensus among this government on critical issues? There's not. And so I've made reference to this ministry's poor record on education. I've referred to the fact that children, although this legislation intends that it will give access to education among larger numbers of persons, and that is noble, I have reminded the people of this country that although this legislation speaks nobly, the executive actions and the dereliction in its duty by the Ministry of Education causes too many children in this country to be deprived of the experience, the very basic experience of education. And I use the word basic experience, the very basic experience of attendance at school. You, ma'am, are a good parent, a good grandparent, a good teacher, and maybe you're a good deputy speaker. And you are aware that when you were a child, this country was not as well off financially as it is now. But you are aware, ma'am, that percentage in terms of attendance at school among primary school children when you were a good little child and a good teacher was higher then. What is happening to this country under this government? And you cannot separate the social agencies. You cannot separate them. What is crime doing to education? I'm still on education. I'm not wondering, what is crime doing to education in this country? Is crime recruiting children into the net of crime at the age prior to the 11 plus? It is as serious as that. This is no joke. Is it possible for the opposition and the government of this country to join hands and minds and hearts in an admission that the tentacles of criminality are reaching into the primary schools of this country? Do we know this? Does this government know it? And I suspect this government knows it. And I know that this government has a responsibility to candidly disclose to the people of this country that the tentacles of crime have reached into the primary schools. And education in this country is at the precipice of destruction. So it is not only poverty, it is not only poverty that is destroying the academic environment in this country, it is crime. It is crime. And I saw the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central present. And he is aware that crime is an existential threat to tourism. Can we join our hearts and hands and minds and intellects in agreement on these issues, since we all claim to love this country? Or will we come in here and sanitize and deodorize every debate and make the people of this country believe that all is well? All is not well. And the moment that we begin to accept that is the moment that this government begins to accept its responsibility to the people of this country, that it needs to start fixing the institutions in this country. It needs to start fixing education in this country, because we are in danger of losing what we had. That is where we are. I repeat, not a breach of the standing orders, but for the sake of emphasis so that the public understands, so that those who are insulated from social realities will now understand that crime, the tentacles of crime, are in the primary schools, they're in the secondary schools, and when we come to tertiary education, no doubt the tentacles of crime. Crime as a social scourge, education as a tool of social development, they have collided with each other. And who is the winner today? This legislation is capable of making righteousness and rectitude the winner. But will crime win this battle? Or will the government continue to tell the people of this country that while education is a political issue, the resolution of crime is not a political issue? They are equally political issues. What they mean is that it is not a partisan issue, but we as a party, we are entitled to comment in a partisan perspective, from a partisan perspective. But it is a political issue. Any matter in which the government is involved legitimately, institutionally, constitutionally, and legally becomes a political issue because the government has a responsibility. And the government has a responsibility to defend the institution of education in this country, as much as it has an equal responsibility to assist in the erasure of criminal activity which is affecting the delivery, the proper delivery of education in this country. Are we coming here to heckle each other? And this country is slipping? We coming here to heckle each other? When this country stands at the precipice, about to topple over into utter disaster, we're losing our little children. I repeat, we're losing them to poverty. And it ought not to be so, because we are told by this government at the very highest levels, we are told by those who work in economic affairs and in the Ministry of Finance and in other government institutions that we are in the midst of bounty. I hope the pun is not applied here. The people of this country are told that this economy is in the midst of bounty. If it is in the midst of bounty, why isn't that bounty filtering down to the welfare department? Why is that bounty filtering down to other ministries that deal with social welfare? Or is that bounty reserved for a privileged few? In government and outside government, the people are not feeling that bounty, but you will ask me not to digress, ma'am, and I will not digress. I am on education. And education is not, as a social agency, education is not experiencing that bounty. How can we rescue those little children who are absenting themselves from school due to poverty? How can we? Can we pay some attention to them today? And if one boy out of 30 is absent from school, that is one too many. One too many. So government, please avoid these acts of self-congratulation, because when you do it, you further alienate yourself from the people of this country. The people out there not applauding and y'all in here applauding. What are you saying then? What are you saying? That you are so disconnected from the daily struggles of people That you see Tuesdays as an event in self-congratulation, it becomes a ritual in self-congratulation. Stop it, I beg you, for your own sake. For your own sake, but your sake is not my concern, to be honest. I recognize that the people of Barbados sent us here, and that our voices must be representative of the interests of the people of Barbados. Permit me, ma'am, then, to come to another area of disastrous management by this government in education. A few years ago, and perhaps more than a few years ago, this Parliament, the public, the teachers, the parents, and the children were told that the common entrance exam is coming to an end. And they were told, prepare thyselves, this is the last year. I was generous towards the government. I included the teachers within those categories of persons to whom the information was transmitted. But the class 3 and class 4 teachers weren't really told. They weren't really given reason for preparation for the closure of the common entrance exam. So they went to school and they decided, look, I am continuing to visit my children with the past papers and to give them tuition in preparation for the common entrance exam. For the last 3-4 years, ma'am. And we had all kinds of high-flown, lofty commissions and commissioners dealing with this transfer from the common entrance to, I don't know what they called it, until one morning somebody got up and told them, look, you know what y'all are proposing failed and was abandoned in a neighboring country? And apparently the government did not know that. But today this country does not know. This country, Barbadians do not know what is the government's present position on the common entrance exam. We are on the subject of education. And please permit me, ma'am, on the subject of education, to speak liberally and generally and expansively on education, while on my way to tertiary, for which this bill is made. And what I'm saying is relevant because if the government wants to be in any way revolutionary, and if the government hears that there are primary school or secondary school children who are disadvantaged financially and cannot go to school, might not the government extend the provisions of this legislation to those hapless little children? That is not revolutionary. That is not revolutionary, ma'am. The revolution already took place in 1961 to the knowledge of every member in this chamber, including you, ma'am. I dare to say that. I dare to say that. As much as you believe, Your Honor, that 1950, the introduction of universal adult suffrage was also revolutionary, and I know you agree with that. So agreeing that universal adult suffrage was pivotal and revolutionary, you also therefore agree that 1961, the liberalization of education to extend to those of merit and not privilege exclusively, also was revolutionary. You, ma'am, will be known for your honesty. And you, ma'am, to make the point even further, would agree that the Status of Children's Act, which abolished the distinction between children born within marriage and children born outside of marriage, that was just law. It was passed in 1981, ma'am. 1981 Status of Children's Act, which you supported and which you think is revolutionary. And if you think that, ma'am, I agree with you. And it has nothing to do, you and I don't even now know who was in office in 1981. We don't care. What was done was well done. And in 1984, the Plantation Tenantries Act, which gave the right to tenants to own their lands at 10 cents a square foot, that was revolutionary. You and I don't care who was in power then. And you and I now do not care who was in power in 1961 when the greatest revolution in education took place in this country. And not only the greatest revolution, but the greatest social revolution in this country. So you and I, ma'am, are at Edem. Let them know that you and I agree on these things. And that you, as one of the distinguished educators in this country, and I hope they honor you for it. I hope they honor you for your contribution in education. You do not have any student that passed through you, ma'am, who does not love you. All up in the age of, I don't want to disclose your age, but there are people in this country 50 years old who still calling you ma'am and teacher, see you on the road, showing you such great respect. It is because of the depth of the contribution that you have made to education in this country. And I will not let any of them deny you. I will not let any of them deny you. And you sit there, and when you're not there, you're over there, and I sit here. And you and I can agree as to the truth. You are one of the outstanding educators in this country. And if it takes the lead of the opposition to say that ahead of your party colleagues, I will say it. Take a bow, ma'am. Take a bow. One of the best teachers in this country, and they coming in here trying to disrespect you by disobeying the rules of this house. I return to the subject at hand, ma'am. I will defend you. And so we were on to the common entrance. What is the government's position, Honourable Member for St. James South, in relation to the common entrance? Is it about to end? And I'm going to say something more about it too. Is the common entrance about to end? Or will it continue? Has the government walked away in shame and disgrace at another one of its failed projects? Like it is walking away from the tint legislation? A few months ago, late last year, we were discussing crime, and we thought we were having a serious discussion. And the Honourable Attorney General walked in here and said, look, I bring in tint legislation for y'all. If you don't take off that tint, I'm going to... Please don't make me laugh, ma'am. Is this government abandoning the stated initiatives in education as it has abandoned in shame and disgrace the tint legislation? Bring it. Bring it. Let that be the swan song of this Attorney General. Bring the tint legislation. If you want to hurt your colleagues, that may be some kind of a secret design to hurt them as you walk away from them. But where is this government? Where is the Honourable Member for St. James South on the common entrance exam? The faces are glum. Where are the members of this government, individually and collectively, on the common entrance exam? Where are we? And that is not a question asked on behalf of a party. That is a question asked on behalf of a country. That the teachers in this country now are not sure as to where they stand, especially third and fourth forms, on this government's position on the 11+. But of course, you will hear that education is not a political issue. You will hear that nonsense at some point in time, except that they will be visited with the realization that the future of the 11+ is in the hands of politicians. Therefore, it is a political issue. So when this government wishes to crawl under a rock, when this government wishes to withdraw and retreat on issues, the propaganda is that it is not a political issue. Well, education is a political issue. Crime is a political issue. And we ask this government to state its political position in relation to education. What is going to be the future of the 11 plus exam? The truth is not ever entirely told unless the voice of suffering is allowed to speak. And I ask those questions also on behalf of the principals of this country, the school principals, who now live through August anticipating that they will be ambushed by this government. They don't know if they're going back to the same school at the end of the first week in September, or whether they can remain part of a culture, an ethos in which they are professionally resident. In other words, man, when a teacher, and more so when a principal, assumes leadership of a school, he or she creates an ethos. And they know their students. They come to know their students through that lived experience, one with the other. They know their school. And you can't uproot a principal after a year or two and transport them elsewhere because you have a friend who wants to come in there. Why is the government doing it? There's no logical explanation for it except that they intend to give favor to a friend who prefers a certain school. Why is the government doing that? Why is the government ambushing the principals of the schools of this country every September? You and I came up, ma'am, primary school and secondary school, and certainly for the whole of primary school, we had the same principal. You went through secondary school, and it was a cycle. Most schools had the same principal for 10 and 15 years. Ellerslie, Mr. Brathwaite, who sponsored cricket at that school and produced some of the best West Indies cricketers under Mr. Brathwaite. And the games master, I'm trying to remember his name, Carlisle Besson. Gibson, Sherwin Campbell, Philo Wallace. Some of the best of Barbados' cricketers were nurtured in that cultural, that academic ethos called Ellerslie. It had a tradition, so that if the government does not understand what it is doing, how it is rupturing people's total academic development by these undue transfers, let it understand today that this government is causing havoc within education in this country, and this government does not understand simply because this government believes that office is an occasion to do favors, to do personal favors, and uprooting an entire tradition, an entire culture, an entire ethos. A principal must get to know his or her school. That is to make the discussion real. Not to visit a discussion with all these cliches and making people feel that all is well. All is not well. And so, I don't think I need the whole day to make the point. I will look at the legislation briefly again. I have heard other ministers come in here. Legislation, sometimes hundreds of pages. Beg your pardon, ma'am. And they feel obliged. And it is their duty to traverse that entire legislation, sometimes in the form of précis, in the form of summary. But no summary today. Why? Was it not read before we came here? Is the public supposed to guess? As I said earlier, is it the duty of the leader of the opposition to do what the government refused to do today? Well, I'm going to tell the public what a few portions of this legislation are about. The salient portions. It establishes a board. It refers to the matter of conflict of interest. In other words, an application for a loan fund is not to be met by a board that has bias. And that's a good legal point. That if a person applies for a loan and the board is considering his application, no member of that board must be fixed with bias. In other words, he must not have a conflict of interest. It must not be a relative, nor a friend, nor a close associate. And that is the virtue in the legislation. But I am working overtime today, simply because the Honourable Member for St. James South decides that this is an occasion for self-congratulation and not for an exposition of the legislation that comes here today. So I'll do the job. I will do the job. I'm not averse to hard work. I am looking curiously at clause 24 of this bill. Before that, I will come to clause 23, which deals, and this is a very sensitive area of this legislation. There are people who assist applicants, and the truth is, in many cases, the commitment is more moral than it can be financial. What I mean by that is that a lot of people agree to be sureties, sometimes being aware that it will be a financial burden. In other words, you act as a surety for somebody who borrows, let's say, $100,000. And in the event that that person fails or refuses or neglects to repay the monies, it falls on the surety. We've had a lot of cases of people going off to the United States and finding employment there, going off to England, Canada, finding employment there, leaving. Not only do they leave a loan behind unpaid, but they leave behind a hapless surety. And the surety has done it as part of a moral obligation. Sometimes it's a close friendship, sometimes it is a relative, sometimes it may be a fellow churchgoer and they've done it as a moral obligation. And we ask the question then, what is the government's policy in relation to resolving what began as a moral obligation but transfigures itself into a financial bond, a bond between the surety and the state and the board? And they remain here, and there's that feeling that they must avoid the fund. The child has succeeded in his exams and he has a job, and perhaps he is starting a family overseas. Perhaps he's in a job which, contrary to popular opinion, a lot of the jobs do not leave people as well off as we think they are. Certainly in some big cities, the obligation to pay rent really erodes the financial resources of those young people. But let us not digress. How is the government disposing itself in relation to people who have exercised, and nobly exercised, a moral obligation to those borrowers? The borrower absents himself or herself, and the hapless surety is in Barbados? Is there any forgiveness? And one does not mean to institutionalize financial forgiveness, because when you sign as an adult. But the public will ask if there's any room for financial forgiveness. Is there any room for negotiation? Is there any room for renewed negotiation? It certainly is done in the commercial environment, in the financial environment, where people go and reschedule their indebtedness. Will there be any room, as a matter of policy, I asked the minister, for rescheduling the financial indebtedness of sureties? Because I've known of cases in which the fund just simply files a claim against the surety in court, and it can cause a certain financial ruin, because here you are paying your own mortgage, and there's a sense in which this becomes a second mortgage. And apart from becoming a second mortgage, it becomes a judgment debt. And here you are sometimes, and a lot of the sureties are retired. So you're talking about people in their 60s and sometimes 70s who tremble at the thought or at the prospect of financial ruin when they ought to be enjoying retirement, except that they have exercised a noble moral obligation to assist a nephew or a niece or the friend or or the son or daughter of a good friend. And they have done that with the hope and the expectation that the person will honor their indebtedness to the loan fund, and they have not. I ask this government, therefore, again, is there any scope for a rescheduling of that debt, not only on compassionate grounds, but according to moral consideration of the plight of the surety? Because what the surety has done, the surety hasn't stolen anything. The surety has helped to build a life. And that life having been built, the surety is now exposed. I repeat, is there any room for renegotiation and rescheduling of that indebtedness as between the fund and the surety? I speak today for the hapless surety who felt that he or she had done a good and noble thing. That is not a question for me to answer. That is a question for the government to engage upon. And I came upon that because I looked at clause 23, which deals with garnishment. Garnishment is an extremely serious sanction, and the lawyers in here will tell you that. And so that the public understands what is garnishment, let me read clause 23, where a person is indebted to the fund and the repayment of the loan is not made in accordance with regulations made under this act and the terms and conditions of the loan, and the board knows or suspects that the person is entitled to or due to receive a payment from another person in this section referred to as the third party, the board may, along with a copy of the certificate obtained pursuant to section 22, deliver to the third party a demand for payment. Let us tell the public, therefore, what is garnishment without tracing across the legislation exhaustively. As section 23 says, as clause 23 says, if B owes A money under the fund is A, B owes A money, and A becomes aware that C owes money to B, A can circumvent B and go with a certificate of that indebtedness and collect B's money from C. That's called garnishment. And it is the way in which the state is able to trace a person's expected funds and go to C and say, look, I know you have money for B, but the law permits me to collect that money from you. And that third person may be the BRA, which is a public institution, or indeed it may be a private institution. And who knows the limits? But as long as C owes the money to B and B has not paid the fund, A can go to C. A being the fund can circumvent B, take a certificate of indebtedness and go to C. It is as serious as that, and that is what the public needs to understand. That is what the public needs to know. That is what the public expected to hear this morning. Not, again, I repeat, the self-congratulation. The public needs to know how serious is this legislation. The public needs to know how serious is this relationship between the loan fund and the borrower and or the surety. That your monies may be garnished even if those monies come from third parties. Do I need to repeat it? I don't think so. And in case I need to repeat it, the public will be told again that if a surety is owed money by a third party, the loan fund may collect those monies for itself from that third party. And that is how serious is this legislation. This legislation is imposing sanctions so that we need to educate our public as to how serious is a transaction involving standing as surety for borrowers for academic progress. And too often the public has felt that it is less than a commercial transaction. Too often the public has felt that it is merely a moral obligation exercised with the sanction, or with the blessing, not the sanction, with the blessing of the state. And some people either don't take it as seriously as they should, and I think in the majority of cases, they can't afford it financially. They simply can't afford it. But in keeping with the revolution in education, they want to see their young people educated. So where is the government? Where stands the government morally? Because the surety often exercises a moral obligation, a moral duty, an act of morality. Will the government be similarly moral on this issue? Will the government visit these transactions with any sense of compassion? Or will the government boast that the indebtedness is only now at 11% and they want it at 5%? Whatever happens, they want it at 5%. Except that the move from 11 to 5 will cause some suffering. It will cause some suffering in the country. And so where are we as a society? What statement do we make in relation to these transactions where the parties can do no better? Because they're not sending them on some frolic, on some frivolity. They're sending them for on an academic pursuit. And there's no pursuit quite as serious as an academic pursuit. Because as we know, ma'am, education not only elevates persons individually, but it elevates an entire society. The problem is, I suppose, a lot of our young people are elevating the societies into which they go. And the only compensation we get, I suppose, is the remittance, which is important because the central bank keeps a record, an official record of remittances as contributing to the gross national wealth of the country. So those are the questions that we ask. How is government disposing itself morally on the issue of failure or inability to repay loans? You would expect me, ma'am, as a lawyer, to deal with the matter of offenses that can be committed under this act. And believe it or not, legislation that appears so harmless will have a section dealing with offenses. This is my duty on behalf of this government, and I will discharge this duty. Clause 26(1) says, an applicant or any other person who by any false representation causes, induces, or attempts to induce the board to grant a loan to him or to any other person is guilty of an offense and liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000 or to imprisonment for 1 year or to both. Notwithstanding subsection 1, the board may recover money due on a loan in accordance with section 22. The law is one thing. Those of us who have read jurisprudence will advance the comment that in keeping with some legal philosophers, that a law is not just unless it has moral content. On another occasion, I'm going to address that fully, and I give early notice to this government that when the TIMP legislation comes, I am going to address the question of law and morality very expansively. When the TIMP legislation comes, I will address the matter of law and morality very, very expansively. But to deal with it briefly here today, I think one will want to pause and ask if this legislation, and I'm not doing this to be contentious nor mischievous, but sometimes we need to withdraw from the contentious debate, and you use the word rancorous today, ma'am. We need not to be rancorous, and we can face each other and ask, is this the kind of legislation that is really due for a criminal sanction? I suppose if the person fraudulently represents that he is going or he is borrowing the money to give to somebody to go to KFIL or to Mona, and it turns out that the person is non-existent, or that the person is not going to KFIL or Mona, but that they're going on some other frolic, that clearly is criminality. But if the nature of the representation, if he says, for example, well, I work for $10,000 a month, well, let me take it to a ministerial salary. I'm not sure how much they get. They get a lot of money, though. They get large amounts of money. And if it is a ministerial salary up in $20-something thousand, and they say, I really get 40,000, that is a misrepresentation. And speaking even on behalf of these well-paid ministers, very well-paid ministers, if one of them inflates an already large salary, let's say by $10,000, would we criminalize him? I don't think so. I don't know, because ultimately he's trying, that well-paid minister who is getting $20-something thousand a month, he may not, he's doing it, he is inflating an already large salary for a good, for the good of his beneficiary. And so that he says, I don't get 25,000 as a minister, I get 40,000 as a minister. Do you really criminalize him? Because he is ultimately trying to send a child to university, and that is noble. Do you criminalize that very good minister with a good and kind heart and expose him to prison? My goodness, you're sending him to prison too. Imprisonment for a year or to a fine not exceeding $5,000. Now, I've made this point before in legislation. There must be some parity between the imprisonment and the fine, if there are alternatives. So if you're going to send a man to prison for a year, surely the fine ought to be beyond 5,000 because there's no parity. Let me put it as simply as this. There's no parity between a year's imprisonment and a fine for $5,000. A year's imprisonment certainly results in greater loss than $5,000. And so I would want the government to revisit that penalty, although I would also be inviting the government to relook that section and to submit that section to some greater drafting detail so that you're not necessarily criminalizing a person with a kind heart, a person who thinks that he is doing something and he is doing it merely to benefit the person on whose behalf he is signing. It may not be compelling, but what is the ultimate intent? The ultimate intent is to help another person. And not to help another person who is intending to do bad, but another person who is intending to do good. That is just the intervention I would make on that. And it goes on to speak of the regulations and so on. I know that the public now feels deprived, that the Honourable Member for St. James South did not favour the public with these details, but if we need to do it, let us do it. And it speaks of meetings of the board. It also speaks of a quorum. And the quorum, which is a subject that is seems to arise in this place from time to time. A quorum of the board is 4. A quorum in here is obviously more than 4, ma'am. But a quorum of that board is 4. I'm not sure what is the quorum in here. We seem to struggle. Bring the tent. You come up. Bring the tent, my man. I beg your pardon, ma'am. Could you please tell the Honourable Member for St. Joseph that I want his swan song to be the tent legislation. I want him to dare to come to the people of this country and criminalize them for making their car cool. And I will speak to him on law and morals. I will remind him of what the legal philosophers said in relation to just law. Pipe up, my friend. You're going quiet?
Maybe you can speak to him on the outside.
On the outside.
Please continue
Well,
on the
tell him don't
trajectory
interrupt
you are on. You're doing fine.
I want to see the draft. I want to see the tent legislation. I beg you. Show me now. Where you got it hidden? In St. James North? Because I see you down there yet. Good. I've managed to make him quiet. And so, ma'am, I hope I have met my duty in relation to this legislation. I have ended at the area of a quorum, not the quorum that is meant to be here on Tuesdays, while the government struggles. And you know they don't like me to talk about the quorum because I hear all kinds of talk about how I don't come in here. I have been here, I have been present in here for every sitting. Every sitting. And the register will confirm that. It will confirm that. But this legislation also deals with the quorum. And I would hope that those who administer and those who preside with this legislation will do so with greater fidelity than those who are meant to be here every Tuesday. I say no more than that. And we'll end by saying that some praise must be given to those who 48 years ago, according to the Honourable Member for St. James South, 48 years ago, someone had the vision to do this, to establish a system in which young people who don't have the financial resources and who did not win a scholarship or an exhibition, but that a system was established to allow them to go and become persons of higher learning, gave them access to higher education overseas. And that is noble. And perhaps it was a continuation of that most pivotal moment that took place in 1961, that most significant of the modern revolutions, and those modern revolutions would have occurred in the second half of the last century. And so 1977 would have been a continuation of the revolution. But it was not the revolution. The revolution took place in 1961. And while we celebrate 1961, and we will never cease to celebrate 1961, we give some applause to 1977. And we ask this government before they depart from this debate to explain to the public more fully why the legislation, the previous legislation has been repealed, why this new one? And if it is the reason that the limit, it accommodates the movement of the limit from 25,000 to 120,000, I think that's what I heard. That cannot be the sole reason, since I am aware that the fund has been for many years lending sums in excess of 25,000. But if that is the sole reason for the amendment, could not the Parliament, if that is the sole reason not for the amendment, for the new legislation, could not the Parliament have merely amended the old legislation to move it from 25,000 to 120,000? I don't think I had the opportunity to look at the old legislation. But in closing, I would, on the subject of education, wish to compliment. I don't come in here asking anybody to clap for that. But I wish to compliment all ministers of education previously in this country, not all. I'm going to stop at a certain point. This country records that Sir James Cameron Tudor, Mr. Erskine Sandiford, I'm not going to remember all of the names. I think Mr. Cyril Walker at one point in time, Mr. Keith Simmons, my deceased friend, Mr. Tyrone Eswick, at one point in time, for a short time. Wherever you are today, Tyrone, rest well, my friend. But when we talk of the recent times, we hear this statement about the lost decade. And this government has spent 7 years visiting the people of this country with that phraseology, telling young people in this country that there was something called the lost decade. And having subjected the people of this country to the kind of maladministration that has been visited on this country in recent times, in response to that statement, many speeches are heard in here, and the lost decade, the lost decade. And this government is not aware that it is now telling the people of Barbados that it is incapable of governing this country because we had a dust storm. And because we had Hurricane Elsa. And because there were 5,000 bolts of lightning one night. And because there was COVID. A government that comes in here talking about the lost decade, that same government is coming in here telling people, well, please forgive us. We have been unable to manage your affairs because Hurricane Elsa came, and COVID came, and we have 5,000 bolts of lightning, and we had a dust storm, so please forgive us. And they expect the people of this country to buy that folly. So in response to this thing about the lost decade, I say to this government and the people of Barbados that it now feels as if we're living in the last decade, that this is the last decade in our lives. That is how it feels. And I was on the subject of education. And I want to pause and commend the Minister of Education who was so assigned to that portfolio, Mr. Ronald Jones. You smile in approval, ma'am, and I will report to Mr. Jones that the chair smiled with approval. Your colleague, ma'am, your esteemed and beloved colleague, your generation, the generation that managed education efficiently and compassionately and with commitment before it descended into chaos. And I have identified the moments of chaos. The IDB survey, the indecision on the 11 plus, the act of domestic terrorism at Government Hill, and more recently, the further chaos in relation to deportment at schools. You, ma'am, I am not going to continue praising you for the rest of the day, but when you were teaching, you taught in a disciplined environment. I'm not going to praise you for the rest of the day. So if you feel it is too much, please stop me, but I want to praise you for being a good teacher. And when you were a good teacher, you did not allow your students to come to school as they felt like, because you would have stopped them by the door, and you would have had your extra comb in your bag. And sometimes you even had a little extra money to give a child who was looking as if he needed something to eat. That's you, ma'am. They don't know you. Well, I'm going to introduce you to them today. They need to know who is our Deputy Speaker. And they need to know that deep down our Deputy Speaker may I say, you don't have a voice, that our Deputy Speaker may well not be in agreement with the protocols in relation to how children are allowed to go to school in this country in a climate of moral decay. I know my Deputy Speaker. Say nothing, ma'am. Say nothing, ma'am. Today is a signal moment when the Leader of the Opposition is defending the Deputy Speaker against the tide of indiscipline that is now fostered by the Ministry of Education. That is why your children love you. And up to the age of 50, they pass you, good morning, ma'am, good afternoon, ma'am. Why they don't give you the accolades that you deserve, ma'am? Why don't they? And so, Your Honor, I will close. You may say that I did not come to bury the government, but I came to praise the Deputy Speaker. And while you do not have a voice, ma'am, that's straight from Shakespeare. And while, ma'am, you do not have a voice in this Parliament, please do not tell them how you feel about education in this country at this point. Please do not confess to them how you felt about the previous administration in relation to education. Please do not tell them that you felt that secondary education in this country was further dignified and elevated when certain schools at the stroke of a pen became sixth form schools. Mr. Ronald Jones, take a bow, sir, wherever you are. And when you hear them talking this nonsense about a lost decade, so much good happened in education then. And that good has been unrecorded, except that I will remind you that in 2018, in my first speech, in a budget in here, I praised this government for restoring access of our 18 plus years old people to tertiary education. And I said it on principle, and I abide by that principle. So publish that. It's on my Facebook page. But a lot of good happened in education under the stewardship of that gentleman. And as much as I praise you today, ma'am, I would be derelict in my duty if I did not praise Mr. Ronald Jones similarly. And I do. I do it now, and I do it without apology. And so, I will close by saying that any financial assistance given to the project in education is well given. I will close by saying that there is nothing in this country that has elevated the lives of the majority of people in this country like the institution of education. And any harm that is brought to education in this country, is a harm brought to the future of this country. In other words, this country cannot survive unless education is supported. And this country will lose all that it has while education is eroded by the scourge of crime, which the government is not controlling. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, not only is maladministration destroying education in this country, but crime is at risk, or crime is destroying education in this country. And both are political issues. Both are to be managed by politicians. Politicians must manage efficiently and effectively education in this country. And it is politicians who must formulate policies for the control of crime, because crime is an existential threat to education. And so, within a broad debate on education, ma'am, I ask this government to meet its responsibility, as I've asked the Honourable Member for St. James South to meet her responsibility in ensuring that this legislation is properly explained to the people of Barbados, in ensuring that this legislation becomes justly managed within the Ministry of Education. I ask this government to communicate to the people of Barbados what is its position in relation to this ministry, that 1 week it has 2 ministers, the next week it has 1. And all of a sudden, for the first time in Barbados' history, we don't have a minister of education. I don't know the name, something about transformation. Well, education has been transformative since 1961. You think we needed a title to tell us about the transformative effect of education? But again, a lot of pretty talk. And ugly consequences. All the years we had a minister of education and a parliamentary secretary or a minister of state. Now two people in there jostling. Which one is senior though? Nobody knows. But that is evidence of the chaos. Maybe there's nothing wrong with it as it is. Nothing wrong with it per se. But it is evidence of the confusion in education. Nobody is sure who is the minister, what is the minister, who is responsible for what. They say one is responsible for the juniors or the seniors. I don't know. I don't know, ma'am. And I think you smile because you also do not know. I think you passed through there. I'm going to stop praising you. There's so much praise I have for you today. I am going to stop praising you, ma'am. I am going to stop praising you because What I would like is for you to go back and help this government. While you are here, ma'am, I don't think it is contemptuous to say that I would like to see you not out of that office, but in another office. And while there are ambitions expressed to ascend once again to that office, whether that will become the case or not, whether those ambitions for your present office will be realized, if you do demit that office, ma'am, please go back and become the Minister of Education and solve the problem. Be the sole Minister of Education. If you want to bring along a Minister of State or a Parliamentary Secretary, bring one along. Bring one or two along. But do not let them push you around, ma'am. Don't let them push you around. Whatever happens with the expressed ambitions and negotiations that are due to take place over the next few days and weeks, whatever happens there, don't let them push you around, man. I will have more to say on that at the appropriate time. Today is not the appropriate time. But I am so glad that I leave this debate with your smiling approval and the curiosity of the member for St. Lucie, who smiles occasionally when he hears these good points. Smiling again. So perhaps the three of us are joined now in these pleas that I make for order and stability in government and order and stability in the Ministry of Education. Need I say more, ma'am? Need I say more? It has been my pleasure to address you on a subject on which you remain one of the outstanding authorities in Barbados, education. If I say more, ma'am, I will dilute the point of your outstanding contribution to education in this country in tandem, in keeping with the tradition established by your former teaching colleague and your immediate predecessor, Mr. Ronald Jones. Ma'am, I am obliged to you.
Honourable Member St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to support the bill that is before this House. I do so, Madam Deputy Speaker, because this bill, very clearly thought out and very clearly presented by the member for St. James South, would allow us to position Barbados in a way that Barbados ought to be positioned for many future generations, and indeed for current generations, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it would be very difficult for me to launch straight into this bill without commenting on the usual circus that we were subjected to by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. You got something for me? You better keep it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, ma'am. I don't mind, he can speak as much as he wants. Madam Deputy Speaker, you know, I think at a certain age, men must come to the realization that the length of one's performance has nothing to do with the quality. And it is clear to me that every single time we come to this House, this is a question of length and not of quality. By the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. You know, James Brown had a song, talking loud and saying nothing. Talking loud and saying nothing. Like a dull knife. That's what we are subjected to every time we come to this House, Madam Deputy Speaker. And Madam Deputy Speaker, the reality is that it is clear to all of us that every single week we come to this place to engage in serious discussion, that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has not read the bill, and that he comes and scribbles 2 or 3 points and chooses to try to make a speech and fails miserably every single time, Madam Deputy Speaker. And then we have now the first hour of the presentation is nothing to do with the bill, just distractions. who got up to speak. Madam Deputy Speaker, you're not even allowed to go to the bathroom, or the Honourable Leader of the Opposition will comment on it. In a place where we know that such is not the behaviour of honourable gentlemen, Madam Deputy Speaker. But furthermore, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition would do himself a favour if he were to read the bill. And the truth is, he said that he was going to explain the bill to the public and spent time on 3 parts of the bill. So what he's accusing the government of not doing, he certainly is guilty, Madam Deputy Speaker, of having not gone through the bill. Doesn't know the bill. Doesn't know the purpose of the bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, and would choose to make people believe that this bill has no contact with ordinary Barbadians, which indeed it does, Madam Deputy Speaker. Most of us in this place, you know, it is always the case, one shouldn't do this, but the opposition leader does it all the time. That whenever he speaks, he leaves, because he cannot take what is due to him. So perhaps he will listen in his car, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill is very clear. He's going to listen in his car. Have a wonderful day, Mr. Opposition Leader. I hope to see you in St. James North. The bill speaks to the proposed governance structure of the new entity, and it speaks of future growth and sustainability, manages risk, and widens the base. But who are we talking about, Madam Deputy Speaker? That I myself, like many in this room, was the beneficiary of a student loan. And when we talk about widening the base and changing the governance structure so that other people, ordinary people, could benefit from it, what are we talking about? This bill is as pertinent to education today as any other bill, Madam Deputy Speaker. We were told that when the member for St. James South presented that the presentation was filled with cliches. But a cliche is nothing more than a simple truth that bears repetition. A simple truth that bears repetition. And what we saw from the presentation from the member for St. James South was a masterful presentation, Madam Deputy Speaker. A masterful presentation. But you know, the opposition leader then went on to talk about cliches. Words like sustainability, resilience, and ecosystem, because he thinks this is a joke. That when we talk about sustainability or resilience or ecosystems, that the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central spends his days and nights discussing, that this is a joke. But that we who live in a world where the climate is changing at a rate that the climate is changing would never make jokes of these things. Sustainability is important, and I want the Barbadian public to understand this, because whenever we talk about sustainability or the need for us to be resilient and to protect the ecosystems and biodiversity, we are talking about being able to survive. Madam Deputy Speaker, climate change is an existential threat to all of us. It is a serious thing, and that the opposition leader chooses every week to come here and to try to make light of these things because he does not understand these issues, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would not want to say that empty vessels make the most noise, but the opposition leader is making the most noise on issues that are pertinent to the development of this country, Madam Deputy Speaker. We were then told, in a fashion similar to the former member for St. Michael South, who I know well, that all we do is manufacture sweet talk, and that there's nothing real happening. Each single member, every single minister in this parliament, one by one, could go through the number of important things that were done to be able to move this country forward, Madam Deputy Speaker. All of us. And when it comes to education, Madam Deputy Speaker, a lot of things were done. I remember from the time we came into office, when most of the schools that we were met with needed repair, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we began the most comprehensive process of school repairs ever in the history of this country. I remember that. And I also must say, Madam Deputy Speaker, because the opposition leader wants to tell us that he's not aware of what is happening in the educational transformation, but we were told in this very place that the opposition leader was invited to a meeting to discuss education and that he refused to go. While he was having lunch, he determined that it was more important to sit on drink and eat fish or chicken or whatever than to go and hear what is happening in the educational transformation. But to come here and to say that he has no clue what is happening in education when he was invited to a meeting to participate in that conversation is a hypocritical thing, Madam Deputy Speaker. If you want to know what is happening in education, then go to the meetings, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you are invited to as a member of this place, Madam Deputy Speaker. But Madam Deputy Speaker, we were told as well that the first clause was clause 3. Listen to the speech, and then nothing about clause 3. Listen, when you have a chance, go back. Nothing about clause 3, because the first contact that was made by in this debate with the bill was for the opposition leader was today, this morning, while he sat there scribbling his notes. And that's why we were treated, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank you for your grace, because we saw him go from here, there, and yonder, had very little to say about that which was before this House, Madam Deputy Speaker. But the bill is clear, Madam Deputy Speaker. The bill is very clear. And I want to just go through a few of the points, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I cannot let it be said as we go from this place that this bill is not important or that this bill does not address a number of the pertinent issues, Madam Deputy Speaker. We understand on this side that there are a number of important and pressing things that we have to address and to concern ourselves with, Madam Deputy Speaker. I began by saying that we are widening the base. Widening the base. And why is that important, Madam Deputy Speaker? Why is that important? I had the good fortune of being a tax specialist in the early part of my career. And the value-added tax was meant to be a tax where it would widen the base. Because the more people that you have who are able to benefit from the system, the more likely it is that you can reduce costs. And when these costs are reduced, Madam Deputy Speaker, who is benefiting? The ordinary people. I could not, Madam Deputy Speaker, have gone on to do a master's degree if it were not for the student revolving. I got a scholarship, but I could not finance it even then. I have told this Parliament on many occasions that I am the son of a bus driver and a conductress. I know very well the hardships of ordinary people, and that I would never come to this Parliament and support anything that disadvantages ordinary people, but I would support very gleefully something like this that makes it easier for ordinary people to be able to live, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to be able to have access to education. You know, I do not like to spend my time on the history of this thing, but it is a shameful event when the leader of the opposition, representing a party that came to this Parliament and took away university education from ordinary people, and then want to come here, Madam Deputy Speaker, and act as if he is so righteous, but has no moral authority whatsoever to speak on education. Because if it were not for education, free education, most of us could not be in here, Madam Deputy Speaker. So when you hear the opposition leader speaking about education, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, recognizing that this leader of the opposition, like his party, had no interest in ordinary people, Madam Deputy Speaker. But what does the bill say? What does the bill do? The changes will position the student revolving loan fund for future growth and sustainability and improve operational efficiency. You want the fund to run well so that more people can benefit from the fund. And those of us who had to take student loans, Madam Deputy Speaker, we understand that. I even heard the opposition leader speak about persons who come forward as sureties. But Madam Deputy Speaker, when you go for a loan, almost any loan, as a surety you are told, I know because I went through the process. I took a student loan. The sureties are told up front, there's no trickery. And Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not new to this bill. I had my student loan in 2000. There were student loans before 2000. It's this kind of hypocrisy. This kind of, again, Madam Deputy Speaker, I cannot call anybody a liar. I would never do it. But I realize that the opposition leader and his bunch receive and report repeatedly erroneous information with a deliberate intention to mislead the public of this country, Madam Deputy Speaker. Because I took a student loan in 2000. Many of us did. And I had to have sureties too. And the sureties were told that essentially, if me being the primary debtor is unable to pay, that they have responsibility for paying. It is explained to every single person. In fact, it is the essence of a surety. And then they sign for it. It is the essence of what a surety is. So to come here again and to say, oh, look, they want to do this to the surety, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is the way it is. And they're told that. And in fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a person taking a loan, you feel very proud when you can reach out and have two people who have enough confidence in you and say that I am so confident in this young man or this young woman that they will repay their loan, that I will stand as a surety, Madam Deputy Speaker. And there's no trick in it. But again, that is the nature of these politics, Madam Deputy Speaker. The second point is that it provides the student revolving loan fund with the flexibility to set its own interest rates and its loan products. Madam Deputy Speaker, any person who's in the business, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, who's an accountant, anybody who's in the business, Madam Deputy Speaker, knows very well that if you are managing an asset like this, you want to have that level of flexibility. But the market isn't always the same, Madam Deputy Speaker. And so this bill allows us to do that. It widens the customer base by allowing it to lend to parents and guardians of students, as well as providing loans for educational expenses such as laptops, associated equipment, and so on, Madam Deputy Speaker. So the bill makes a lot of sense. The bill makes a lot of sense, but were we to subject ourselves to the deliberate intent of the opposition leader, you would think that we came in here to cast some injustice on ordinary people. And in fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, most of what was said is this, you know, the usual innuendo and insinuations, Madam Deputy Speaker, but very little contact with the actual bill. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe that this bill supports Barbadians in a way that a good government would want to support Barbadians, Madam Deputy Speaker. I had, you know, the good fortune of being a lecturer at the university. I was a part-time lecturer at the university for over 10 years. I taught social policy, social theory. The Honourable Member for St. Michael, South Central. That's it. Also, Madam Deputy Speaker, having had a similar experience. I taught social policy, social theory, research methods. I taught a number of things, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I was very fortunate because I knew that, again, if I weren't allowed to have a student loan, I probably could not be there. But there are some people who are now hoping to go to higher office in this country, asking to be considered to be members of this parliament, who also had the good fortune now, and it is really a fortune, a good fortune, to teach people's children. And instead of doing what they're supposed to do and teach people's children, Madam Deputy Speaker, they spend all kinds of time doing all kinds of things. But if you cannot do the job that you have, on what basis are you applying for this job that you want? Madam Deputy Speaker, let us talk about education. Because teaching the children at any level, primary school, secondary school, or the tertiary level, Madam Deputy Speaker, is important. It is important work, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to give, because we spoke about the 11 plus. Just a few weeks ago, last week maybe, or 2 weeks ago, when I was at my primary school at Bay Primary, I was asking the students to talk to me about education, how they feel about the 11 plus. And there were a number of views. And the good thing about this government, because on the one hand, we are accused of not consulting. But whenever we bring something to the public, and we consult with the public, and we take time to refresh, maybe take fresh guard, you're accused of not making a decision. We have to decide, Madam Deputy Speaker, what it is, because for me, the process of consultation is important. And all we have here is a process of consultation. But I asked one of the students, as I asked all the students, tell me what you think about this exam, because are you afraid, was my question, are you nervous? And one student said to me, I am so nervous. And I said, I understand that because you could get nervous at 11 plus. And this young lady said to me, I am nervous because I have one shot at this. This 11 plus for me is one shot, and I feel that I should have more than one chance to get it right. Madam Deputy Speaker, even children understand that this is a conversation that we need to have. Even children understand that it is a conversation that we need to have. And we are taking multiple views. There were many views expressed in that classroom. There was never one faction in a room. We listen to the views of the public, and that is what we're doing. Time and time again, go back, hear the views of the public. There's nothing wrong with listening to the public and changing your opinion. There's nothing wrong with listening to the public and making amendments, Madam Deputy Speaker. And in fact, I must also say that I know when the Honourable Member for St. Philip West was there were many meetings held to have consultation. And that sometimes the people who come out to have the greatest criticisms after the fact, refuse to engage in the process. I saw that with most of my bills. And even though we would have had many consultations, you still take a pause and you go back. But there's no harm in that, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that is indeed what we are doing here, Madam Deputy Speaker. But I thought it funny, Madam Deputy Speaker, when the opposition leader said he would want to praise the government, he wants to congratulate the government, and then he almost choked. And not to know he has not said what he's going to congratulate the government on, because the words could not come out of his mouth. So intent on trying to bring this government into disrepute. But even the truth betrayed him, because he said, I want to congratulate the government, and then he could not get out the words. Madam Deputy Speaker, and I say to you without fear at all that there's much to congratulate the government on, Madam Deputy Speaker. We haven't gotten it right in all cases. We were not seeking to be perfect, but of course we were seeking to bring progress to ordinary men and women in this country, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we have done so. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last thing that I want to speak on very quickly is in relation to the comment made twice about us refusing to address ordinary people, or about us refusing to come into contact with people who are suffering, Madam Deputy Speaker. And if there's one thing that this government cannot be properly accused of, is failing to address the issues of people who are struggling in this country, Madam Deputy Speaker. That is the one thing that we cannot accuse this government of. Now, granted, of course, that even with the best will in the world, Madam Deputy Speaker, you're not going to be able to reach everyone. But our effort has been such, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I will go through a number of things in response, because the argument is being made that because we haven't made contact with these things, that persons not benefiting from education, that somehow the country is in peril. In fact, the phrase that was made was that the country is on the precipice of disaster. And if you were to listen to the leader of the opposition, you would think that Barbados is going to be non-existent tomorrow, that the sky is falling, Everything in this country is wrong, according to the leader of the opposition, Madam Deputy Speaker. Education is wrong. You haven't done anything for persons with disabilities. You haven't done anything for the children. Over and over again. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me remind the Parliament. And I remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, in terms of disabilities, the number of meetings with the Ministry of Education to be able to make education available on equal footing to persons with disabilities, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the truth is that no government prior to this government, and even this government, Madam Deputy Speaker, because there's still work to do, and there are some matters on which we must never be political. When it comes to children with disabilities, we must never be political, Madam Deputy Speaker. And that we must be honest in saying that generations of different manifestations of this Parliament, Madam Deputy Speaker, hadn't incorporated persons with disabilities in education the way they should have. But that we are seeing efforts now being made by the Ministry of Education to right that wrong. We saw in this Parliament a policy brought to address persons with disabilities on a number of issues, including education. We immediately followed that up with a bill, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill, that addressed a number of issues in education for persons with disabilities, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have done significant work, Madam Deputy Speaker. Also in relation to welfare, because the point was made, again, that instead of doing this, put the money into welfare, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I say in this Parliament, I said it during the estimates, and I'm saying it again, Madam Deputy Speaker, the most funding, in some cases over 190%, that has ever gone to persons on the welfare roll, Madam Deputy Speaker, in persons who are receiving welfare support is no. We have increased it by 195% in some instances, Madam Deputy Speaker. So that when you look at the budget for the ministry, as opposed to the budget previously, we are putting the most financing behind helping the poor. And then we came with the One Family program, of which education is a significant pillar. And the One Family program addresses the needs of the 1,000 most vulnerable families in Barbados, Madam Deputy Speaker. So that what we are saying is that all over, no matter how you look at it, we are putting in place strategies to be able to assist with education. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will not speak on crime, but I will tell you this. I grew up in the Pine. I grew up in the planet I'm talking now about in the 80s, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I know back then what it was to be able to see things that children should not see. I know what it is, Madam Deputy Speaker, to sit with my friends and to count the number of persons that I know as a boy that got killed, Madam Deputy Speaker. One after one, the first being permit me to say Barry Jack. Madam Deputy Speaker, we played as boys. The police had shot him, but we played as boys, and many others after that. I do not take this job, Madam Deputy Speaker, or what we must do as a political thing. Because in the 1980s, when I was too young to understand, my friends were dying, Madam Deputy Speaker. And that we have as a society to tackle this issue in its totality. We have to look at education, we have to look at poverty, we have to look at employment, we have to look at community activities, we have to tackle it in its totality. But to constantly make reference to it as if it is solely a political thing is dangerous, it is mischievous, and it is misleading, Madam Deputy Speaker. I care too much for the people I grew up around, the people that I represent in St. Michael South, in Paddock, in Dawes Road, and Bayland, and British and other places, to come here and make it a political issue. We have to be able to build back this country, education being part of it, community engagement being part of it, Madam Deputy Speaker. So fundamentally, all of us must take guard, and all of us must play a role in addressing this problem. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I really just want to get up to support the bill. I have listened, Madam Deputy Speaker, time and time again as the opposition leader is a tail that wags too long. I am going to wrap up, and an hour later, still wrapping up, saying nothing. An hour in the beginning, saying nothing. Madam Deputy Speaker, the debates that we have in this Parliament are too important. This bill is too important. The possibilities of children born into circumstances like myself, like most of us in this place, Madam Deputy Speaker, the possibility for them to be able to have wider access to loans, to be able to repay those loans a little bit longer so that the loans don't hinder them in life, Madam Deputy Speaker. These are important things, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is only a man who is at war with himself who would not recognize that these are virtuous things in this bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that all of us in this place will benefit one way or the other because our constituents will benefit, our families will benefit, Madam Deputy Speaker. So again, I want to close as I began by commending the member for St. James South for bringing this piece of legislation to the Parliament. I could not close, in all honesty, without thanking the member for St. Philip West, who I know piloted a lot of this work, who would have done a lot of this work to get us here, who as Minister of Education, Madam Deputy Speaker, took a lot of licks from the public, but was doing a very, very good job in terms of transforming Barbados. I want to thank her, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to submit this bill to the people of Barbados. I asked them to go and take a look at it. And if they do not understand the benefits of it, to have a conversation with almost any of us, Madam Deputy Speaker. Any of us on this side, Madam Deputy Speaker, because this bill will make a difference to ordinary people. And on those few words, Madam Deputy Speaker, I support the bill, and I commend you for your time. I thank you for your time.
Member for St. James.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm reminded of these words that always guide or should guide how we speak when we speak. In Proverbs 10:19 it says, when there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. But he who restrains his lips is wise. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch South is known for his continuous flow of rhetoric, the soporific orations and cliches. He is known for hours and hours of repetition that does not connect in any way with the matter at hand. And we've given him a lot of latitude because we recognize that he is the only person here. But it comes to a level where by allowing him to run on that long, long chain, we have come to discover that there's a lot of transgression in his many words. He treated us to the cliches of the scourge of crime, the precipice of destruction, and when he's lost for words, pretty talk, pretty talk, pretty talk. Education descending into chaos, education being at the pivotal revolutionary moment. These are the things that we are treated to, but it is a lot of fury, delivering and offering nothing. Now, as persons indicated, education is extremely important, and getting improved results in our students is the center really of our concern. But I will tell you that today, the performance of the leader of the opposition gave me great cause for alarm and says that as a government, we do need to pay greater attention to assessing our children to understand when there are learning deficits, when there are difficulties with their capacity to learn. Because obviously, not having these things in place for years past, at some point in time, children will fall through that crack. The unfortunate thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that one of them may end up as your leader of opposition one day. So there were three things that really alarmed me. Now, I'll explain why. We recognize that more and more the children do have challenges, and we would have put back in place under the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, we started testing for sight, testing for hearing, testing for speech, because we recognize that it is important to be able to catch any of those issues early, because one of the things that we seek to do is to develop a personal development plan for that child, so the child's teachers can give appropriate remedial support and appropriate approaches in instruction that helps that child to succeed. I would like to have the Honourable Member for Christchurch South to be able to avail himself of such a plan. And I will tell you why. As I listened to him, I realized that this was really a first reading speech for him, because he was actually now reading the legislation for the first time. We've come to learn that when he wants to go through legislation line by line, it's because he's not read it, he's not prepared, and he has to run out of the chamber to take a phone call to hear what to say in relation to that piece of legislation. Then he tends to experience memory lapses, but I can recommend to him there are certain vitamins that you can take that can help to improve your memory, because when he spoke to the chamber, he obviously didn't catch it, as it was said, that the loan limit was 20,000, and it actually rose then to 125,000. So I'm sure that he would be relieved to know that, so he can recognize that it has been properly addressed. But what really puzzled me was his reference to something about the release of trillions of dollars of investment in Barbados when we were discussing, I believe it was the Business Barbados bill. He did not quite adequately remember the bill. But it speaks to English comprehension. In English comprehension, what a teacher seeks to do really is to help the child understand the sense of the text and to be able to answer accurately and with intelligence questions on that text. Now, obviously, that may have been a weakness for the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, because in that particular presentation on Business Barbados, the comment was never that Barbados was going to get trillions of dollars of investment, but rather the statement said that there are trillions of dollars of investment around the world, around the globe. And what Barbados was seeking to do, Barbados was seeking to create a business environment in which we could try to attract quality investment to Barbados, but never was a statement made or promised that we would bring trillions of dollars of investment. The other thing that was of great concern to me was, and I found this particularly offensive, and I'll tell you why. First of all, he talked about we should join together. I was pleased at first to hear him say that we were to join together as government and opposition. We should join minds and hearts so that we can look to address the issues in school because education was important. Now, when I heard that, the joining together, I say, he's understanding that we need to work together. But then, when I heard that it was to address issues affecting education, I was wondering which matrix revolution he was living in. I'll explain why. One of the most important things, and he spent some time on it, the 11+ exam, though it's not part of this debate. And he raised a number of questions on the 11+ and wanted to know where we were as a government with it. It was as if he had forgotten that a few short weeks ago, he and his team on education were invited by the Prime Minister of this country to meet with education officials that we could present to them some of the options that we were looking at in terms of how we were going to deal with 11+. You would not believe, listening today, Madam Deputy Speaker, that he was invited to do so. And it was to be a lunchtime, so it would not crowd into anybody's time if you had alternative duties that you had to go to. They were invited to join us for lunch downstairs in the parliamentary dining room. The team went down, we went in and sat, and then we discovered that they were sitting at the far end of the dining room. So we thought that they did not understand what was the location for the lunch, where the presentation would take place. On questioning and going to them and saying, oh, the luncheon is over here, we want to invite you to come in because everybody's here, the Chief Education Officer, to present on the 11+ options and to get your input and to collaborate. The message was sent back that they cannot attend the meeting. Meanwhile, sitting and having lunch. I found that absolutely offensive, but it was also indicative that in truth and in fact, the concern for the children of Barbados and their well-being is spurious. It is only for political advantage. And that is a shame, ma'am. Because this country must never bring to office people who have at the bottom of their hearts no genuine concern in the children of Barbados. And if I was misrepresenting him or misunderstanding on what basis they refused to come and have not set up another meeting either, it was not until just a couple weeks ago, just a few days ago, when our children's performance in the 11+ was put at risk because of actions taken by others, the gentleman for Christchurch South raised not his voice in defense of these same children, but could speak ad nauseum about what he considered to be the failings of the Barbados Labour Party when it comes to education. I found that offensive because at the bottom, and I'm realizing this now, at the bottom of all the talk and all of the ballerina positions that he takes, all the drama that he treats this chamber to, there is no serious or deep concern for the children of this country. But I have to give him kudos for one thing that he finally explained to me. He's often fond of coming in this chamber and behaving like a schoolmaster and a professor who is about to school a group of students in law, in drafting legislation, and all kinds of things. And I found that today when he was speaking, there seemed to be, I don't know, you have to call it a curious mental self-deception. Now, he was raising a concern about the speed at which we want to reduce arrears from 11% to 5% and how we would hurt all kinds of people to be able to get there. And I want to reassure him that over the years, the Student Revolving Loan Fund has always taken an extremely humane approach in dealing with arrears. That's one of the reasons why they had the outstanding arrears for so long. I myself have had to listen to persons who were in problems with the fund, and they wanted to know, well, what can I do, what could be done, and so on. And always, the management team has always said, we seek to sit with people and make reasonable arrangements based on their circumstances. And they've always done that. They've always done that. They're responsive, and I really want to thank the team. But I found it curious that he should raise the issue of if a person comes before the fund and misrepresents his circumstances in order to get more money than they're entitled to ensure that their child is able to get an education. His question was, should you criminalize that person? Now, I can sympathize with every parent who is challenged to find the funds to be able to make sure their child gets an education. I want to reassure him that the Student Revolving Loan Fund will work with you. You may have to take it a little more slowly. You might have to make different types of arrangements. But our goal is to ensure that every person who wants to get that additional tertiary education, that we find a way that we can enable them so to do. But when he made the comment about criminalizing a person who lies to get resources that, on the face of it, they're not entitled to, it had a curious ring to me, Madam Deputy Speaker. It reminded me of another member of his party who, for some reason, to this day, cannot understand why taking money from an institution and putting it on your personal account while you are in charge of a ministry that has responsibility for a unit under you that has the ability to give a contract to that same company. I've always found the explanation curious. It's not only that they sought to put to the public that there was a dire need and therefore it was justified to yield to the temptation. That was the commonality with this example that he gave. But the person also went on to say, but this is not a crime in Barbados, and tried to persuade people overseas that in Barbados, this type of behavior is not a crime, is normal and fully acceptable. No, I thought they were just making excuses at a personal level. What I did not understand, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this seems to be a philosophy and an underlying value that may be running through the Democratic Labour Party. Because to have the leader utter those words sent chills through me. I believe in working with people if they have a difficulty. And one of the things that we need to have in our country are more counselors that can help people work out a personal plan to be able to get to the destination when they want to get to a destination. We have to encourage people that if you live in Christchurch and you're going to St. Michael, your journey is not going to be the same as the person living in St. Lucie trying to get to St. Michael. There may be more challenges. It might take longer to get from St. Lucie to St. Michael, but you can get there once you develop a plan that is based on your reality. And every single person in Barbados, we can sit down and work out something, a timing that allows you to eventually get there without you having to go to an institution and perjure your soul and put yourself in trouble. And I want to encourage people, let us hold to the high road and not go down the road that has been put before us by the leader of the opposition. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am very pleased with this bill. I thank the Honourable Member for St. Michael South for his support of the bill, because we know that the further changes that have been made in this bill to add to what was gone before is going to create greater opportunity, Madam Speaker, for more resources to be acquired, that we can help more people as we seek to stimulate Barbadians to get involved in continuous professional learning. We know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the new products that they're putting on the road are responsive to the needs of Barbadians, especially those who are challenged financially, by helping them with back to school. For people who need to do continuous professional education, that they're going to be able to have access to professional and training qualification, certification opportunities. These are some of the things that this bill has promised to do. And we believe that once this bill is passed, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Student Revolving Loan Fund personnel will work as diligently in the future as they have done in the past to continue to build an organization that has close to $50 million in assets and investments and is able to turn over $7 million annually, and as a result not have to use government funds, but is able to take care of its business while at the same time take care of the dreams of Barbadians. And I want to salute them. I want to encourage them. I want to encourage all the past ministers of education who have been associated with helping this unit to come to where it is. Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are greatly grateful, and we thank you for giving us your attention. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I beg that you do now leave the chair. No, not yet. Second time? Okay. I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Beg second that.
Honourable members, the question is that this bill be now read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Beg second that.
Question is that I don't do chair, or they
And the House
House resolve itself in committee of further consideration. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
This honorable house is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, permission to call in parts, please, or in clauses for sure. Clauses 1 to 9. Clauses 1 to 9. Clauses 1 to 9.
Right. I beg to move that clauses 1 to 9 stand part.
May I second that?
The question is that clauses 1 to 9 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 10 to 15.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 10 to 15 stand part.
May I second that?
Question is that clauses 10 to 15 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 16 to 20.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 16 to 20 stand part.
May I second that?
The question is that clauses 16 to 20 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 21 to 25.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 21 to 25 stand part.
May I second that?
The question is that clauses 21 to 25 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 26 to 33.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 26 to 33 stand part.
May I second that?
The question is that clauses 26 to 33 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
May I second that?
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to Her Honor, the Deputy Speaker, the passing of one bill in committee.
May I second that?
The question is that I do now report to Her Honor, the Deputy Speaker, the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no.
There are actually two schedules. The second schedule. Not the first schedule.
Second schedule.
You just don't have it listed in it.
Second. Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
May I second that?
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Go ahead. Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to Her Honor, the Deputy Speaker, the passing of one bill in committee.
May I second that?
The question is that I do now report to Her Honor, the Speaker, the passing of one bill, the Deputy Speaker, the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Honourable members, the chairman of committees has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
I beg to second that.
The question is that
Bill be read a third.
this bill be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say
Aye.
aye. Those against, please say no.
Madam
You think the ayes have it?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Student Revolving Loan Act 2024.
Beg to second.
The question is that this bill be now passed and be so cited. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it? This bill is now passed.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but not yet though, not yet though. I want to do the other order. Order number 13, ma'am. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the House, to move the passing of a resolution that the Honourable the House of Assembly concur in the amendment made by the Honourable the Senate to the Seaport Industry Management and Operations Bill 2025.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the resolution do not pass.
Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Question.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Revert to announcements by your Honour.
Honourable members, we now revert to other business. I have receipt of correspondence from the Ombudsman, and I would wish to read you the information. It is my pleasure to submit to you the report of the activities of the Office of the Ombudsman for the period January the 1st, 2020 to December the 31st, 2022, along with that of 2023. The submission is made in keeping with sections 13(6) of the Ombudsman Act, Cap 8A of the laws of Barbados, which states that a general report of the functions of the Ombudsman shall be prepared and submitted for laying before each House of Parliament. And the report indicates reports for the activities of the Office of the Ombudsman for that period, January the 1st, 2020 to December the 31st, 2022, and for that as of 2023.
Revert to government business.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until the 27th of May at 10 a.m.
27.
The question is that this chamber now be adjourned until the 27th of March, the 27th of May, excuse me, the 27th of May, 2025 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All honourable members, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber is now adjourned until the date expressed earlier.